Can I welcome members, officers and the public here in the gallery and watching on the webcast. The London Assembly is the voice of London, composed of 25 members elected at the same time as the Mayor, in order to hold him to account and scrutinise his policies. This is Mayor's Question Time, a meeting of the Assembly, which means that all members are invited to attend and ask questions of the Mayor. In case of an emergency and any need to exit the building, guests seated in the public gallery should follow security staff, and Assembly members should follow the meeting clerk. Members are also reminded that any electronic devices should not be placed in front of microphones. Can I ask the clerk, Rebecca Arnold, to confirm any apologies of absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies for absence from Assembly Member Fortune. We don't have any members in remote attendance today.
Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to welcome staff from the Parliamentary Research Service in Westminster who join us here today in the gallery. Since we last gathered for the full Assembly meeting on the 1st December, the Housing Committee met to assess the concerns about the quality of exempt accommodation in London and how these concerns compare to other areas of the country. The Budget and Performance Committee progressed further in their scrutiny of the Mayor's budget by questioning the London's Legacy Development Corporation and the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation on their budgets for 2023-24. The following day, the Budget and Performance Committee looked at what funding pressures lie ahead of the Mayor's Office for Policing Crime, the Metropolitan Police Service and the London Fire Brigade. As part of its investigations into the green transition, the Environment Committee discussed the opportunities and challenges that exist for businesses in London as they commit to taking greener measures in their work. The Police and Crime Committee questioned the Mayor on events related to the departure of the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner. The Transport Committee examined the future of road user charging in London, what a road user charging scheme might look like. And finally, the London Oversight Committee looked at what progress the GL had made on the independent review by the Equal Group since it's published in March of this year. Can I ask the Assembly to note the interest set out at the item number 2? And I also want to, also, do Assembly members have any other further disclosable pecuniary interests which relate to the items on the agenda for today's meeting? Any other relevant interests, including any declarations in relation to gift and hospitality which are not reflected in the Authority Register of Gift and Hospitality? I'm going to ask Rebecca to make a declaration of dispensation we've received for an item which comes later on in the agenda. So over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note for the record that the Monitoring Officer, in her letter of the 12th of December to all Assembly members, has granted a dispensation to all Assembly members in relation to any decision that they may be asked to take in the exercise of the Assembly's powers under Section 24 of the GLA Act 1999. In relation to the proposed elected member salary determination 2022, which is on the agenda today. It's been circulated under a cover of a supplementary agenda. The letter sets out the reasons for that dispensation, which I can reflect in the minutes of the meeting, but I just wanted to draw that to members' attention.
Thank you. Can I ask the Assembly to confirm the minutes of the London Assembly plenary meetings held on 2nd and 3rd November 2022 and the Mayor's Question Time meeting held on the 17th of November 2022 for me to sign as the correct records? Thank you. Can I ask the Assembly formally to receive the Mayor's report covering the period 4th November to 1st December 2022? The Mayor will now provide us an oral update for up to 5 minutes in length on matters occurring since the publication of his report. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Given this is the last meeting we'll all have together in 2022, I want to take this opportunity to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I also want to thank you for your public service to our city over the past 12 months. Whatever our disagreements, I know that we all passionately want to do what's best for London and for our communities, and I look forward to working with you in the new year. Chair, it was great to see many of colleagues at the carol service at Sadiq Cathedral last night, where we had the chance to pay tribute to London's Christian communities who make an immense contribution to our city through their many selfless acts of charity, kindness and compassion. As Londoners grapple with a vicious cost of living crisis, it's never been more important for us to spare a thought at any assistance we can provide for the less fortunate in our city this Christmas. Later today, I'll again be visiting a food bank, this time in North West London, which does amazing work feeding thousands of Londoners every week who would otherwise struggle to eat. We know, however, that food banks across our city are finding it difficult to cope amid a rise in demand and a fall in donations as Londoners' finances are increasingly squeezed. That's why I want to appeal today to anyone with the means or the time to consider supporting your local food bank where you can. I'd also like to kindly ask members to promote our annual campaign to support rough sleepers, which has raised more than £500,000 since 2017 and made a real difference to some of the most vulnerable Londoners. With temperatures plummeting, it's all the more vital that we're able to step up our efforts to help those sleeping rough on our streets. So if anyone who wants to find out more, please visit the City Hall website. There's no getting away from the fact these are incredibly tough times for Londoners. As important as it is, unfortunately, we know that charity and goodwill alone can't fix these problems. They can only be solved by government, local, regional and national working together. That's why from City Hall, we're doing all we can to help Londoners, including spending more than £80 million specifically to help our communities with the cost of living. Chair, I look forward to answering questions this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We now move to the questions on the... Assembly Member Duval.
You spoke of plummeting temperatures of this week, and of course we're not out the woods. January and February doesn't look pretty grim, and then combined with an economic cost of living crisis, it's difficult. Can you also pay tribute to the public sector workers that carry on working during these adverse weather conditions, and think about the emergency services and transport workers, local council workers, including postal workers who deliver our services during these difficult times?
Thank you, Chair. At the Carol Service last night, I paid tribute to all these key workers that you've mentioned. Well, while some of us will be enjoying holidays, they'll be serving our city. Police officers, firefighters, those in the ambulance service, transport workers, postal workers, those who keep our public transport running, including as New Year's Eve ends and the New Year begins. We know, of course, our nurses will be working throughout this period as well, doctors and others, porters, cleaners and the like, and I'm sure on behalf of all of the Assembly, I want to send my best wishes for this Christmas period, but also to thank them for being true public servants of our great city.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to the questions on the priority order paper. Each group is allocated an amount of time to ask their questions that is proportionate to their size. The first question is 5275, flood risk in London, in the name of Assembly Member Plensky.
Thank you, Chair. There are no statutory duties on City Hall in this area. Nonetheless, I've taken action on this matter. Examples of the action we've taken include convening a roundtable, bringing together all those with statutory responsibilities following serious flash flooding in 2021. Through the roundtable and the task and finish group that followed, stakeholders worked on the key short-term and longer-term actions needed to improve both London's emergency response towards this and our city's resilience. The group are now developing London's first ever citywide surface water flooding strategy. There is a strategic group now in place to oversee delivery of this work, and we're making good progress. The group complements the statutory responsibilities of the London Boroughs, the Environment Agency, TfL and Thames Water, who must continue to take forward immediate actions to reduce flooding. My offices have been working to ensure Thames Water's London Flood Review and the National Infrastructure Commission's Flooding Review, both recently published, are considered as part of our forthcoming surface water flooding strategy. My offices have contributed to both reviews, helping shape recommendations. My London Plan policies are also reducing flood risk, and the London Resilience Partnership are well prepared for extreme weather. I sent out 45,000 leaflets to basement properties ahead of the summer, providing flood advice. I called on boroughs to standardise their public flood information. We streamlined communications between partners and improved sharing of data during incidents. Thames Water increased capacity on its call centre, and we agreed 30 actions on flood emergency preparedness and response, most of which are now complete. My annual London Flood Awareness Week, which began in 2018, ran at the end of last month with good coverage across social media. My Green New Deal programmes continue to deliver sustainable drainage, and I've just launched another round of the Green and Resilient Spaces Fund targeting areas at highest climate risk. I'm working with utility companies using the infrastructure mapping application to help coordinate street works, promoting a dig once approach to deliver sustainable drainage with reduced costs and disruptions. And I'm working with the Environment Agency on their Thames Estuary 2001 programme to ensure London is protected from the risk of tidal flooding from the sea. Despite a lack of powers, responsibility and resources, we've done a huge amount, but the government's still moving too slowly, and I'm calling on them for a flood risk funding to be available and simplified so we can access it for small urban flood interventions.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing already in this area. I'm really pleased to hear the strategic group is now meeting and that work's underway. It's really important. I asked you a written question about that strategy group and some of the work that they're doing, and you answered, this body will be working to ensure that improvements are made to surface water flood management. Now, if you're going to improve the management of water on the surface, you need more green space, more SUDs, as you just identified too. Now, I understand the need for new groups and for discussions, but what action is happening right now to depave, to make sure we've got less concrete on the ground and actually we're taking action right now rather than a year or two's time to make sure we're containing this flooding? Yeah,
as ever, Chair, the member makes a good point. So we've done a lot of work around what I've discovered is the acronym is SUDS. It's the Sustainable Urban Drainage System. So the idea is to use opportunity provided by improvements to make sure that SUDs go down. And what we're doing is working with councils, TfL, to make sure any permanent street space improvements have the SUDs there. Because you're right, there's no point waiting 3 years down the road. We need to be retrofitting where we can. And when there are works taking place, use the opportunity to put in SUDs. So to give you some reassurance, at the moment TfL is pursuing 5 schemes, part funded by my Green and Healthy Streets Initiative and Thames Water to deliver SUDs at Tolworth, Nine Elms Lane, Edgware, Streatham High Street and Old Street. They'll deliver in total almost 24,000 square metres of SUDs catchment. Additionally, you mentioned surface water. We're also trying to look at subsurface, improving drainage and so forth. You know, the new tidalway that's been built as well. But you're right, we've got to think about, the more concrete there is, the less opportunity there is to make sure that the water can seep in. And SUDS is one way. The other point, of course, that I mentioned in my answer is the growing back greener. The more green space we have, you can't beat nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with TfL, you had a target of 50,000 square metres. But from 21-22, we only actually drained 500 square metres, so that was only 100th of your target. Now, to be fair to you, if you add the boroughs to that, you still miss it by 1/7 of your target. So you're on course to miss this target for a third year in a row. Now, I just heard you say there that there's lots of schemes, and I know you've called for £1 billion of SUDS investment. So it seems like we're on the right track on this. But I think the bigger question is about the lack of data, because whenever I've looked for more specifics, there's very rarely figures about how much or where. So what can you do to make sure we've got more accurate and more up-to-date data on SUDS?
Well, missing from your question was the big obvious elephant, which is COVID. So COVID stopped things down, and it's only fair that you should have mentioned that. But of course, we started in 2019-20 with the target, and 13 boroughs agreed just by themselves to deliver almost 30,000 square metres, but then COVID happened. And so nothing happened during COVID.
There wasn't even a figure given last year, and there was no COVID last year.
Well,
or we were out of the lockdown last year.
I'm afraid we weren't out of COVID last year. This time last year, Christmas was very different to this year. We also had, of course, which was missing from your question, no funding secured for TfL. TfL literally having no deal with the government. So the two big changes is us hopefully being out the worst of COVID, but also us now having a long-term capital and revenue deal with the government on TfL's funding. The reason why it's not possible to have a number for the amount of SUDs going in across the city is because a number of different landowners we were putting SUDs in, and there's no way of collating that. So you mentioned the boroughs figures. There's TfL, there's other developments and so forth. So we're trying to get the information across London. The target was for everybody, not just for TfL. And we're trying to improve the way of catching that data for the obvious reasons that you and I have discussed. Unless you measure it, you don't know how well you're doing. So I'm hoping to see more progress over the course of the coming period, and you will see that figure going upwards.
Good to hear that it'll be going upwards. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have a good holidays and Happy New Year.
You too.
I'm out of time.
Thank you. The next question is the name of Assembly Member Kripash Hirani on the health workers' industrial action.
Thank you, Chair. And it's very apt this question's been asked today for obvious reasons. London owes a debt of gratitude to its health and care workers. Throughout the pandemic, they went above and beyond to protect and save lives. From delivering life-saving vaccines to caring for us in our darkest days, they stepped up when we needed them. They truly are the best of us. But London's health and care workers who've been underpaid for years are mentally and physically exhausted. The last 3 years have taken their toll, and as we head into the winter, there will be no let-up. From the cleaners and porters, keeping services safe and moving, to the doctors and nurses taking care of our most sick and vulnerable, their dedication should be rewarded as well as recognised. That's why it's heartbreaking to hear of food banks being set up in hospitals for staff and of nurses who cannot afford sky-high heating bills. The cost of living crisis is hitting Londoners hard, and health and care workers are no exception. I'll continue to do my bit from City Hall, as well as sharing resources through our cost of living hub. We're working with the NHS to encourage trusts to become London living wage employers. As discussed at the November London Health Board, 14 trusts are now accredited, with an ambition for all trusts to achieve that next year. But I can only do so much, and the London living wage will only get us so far. With inflation at over 10%, cost pressures are being felt at all levels, and the government needs to step up and do more. The NHS is already facing a recruitment and retention crisis, and fair pay will be key to delivering the health and care workforce it needs. No one wants to strike. Health and care workers only contemplating industrial action because they believe the workforce crisis is putting patients at risk. And for workers who are already struggling, giving up a day's pay isn't easy. I'm calling on the government to engage meaningfully with the unions and work on a serious proposal for giving our hard-working health and care workers the reward they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And even before any strike action and winter pressures, no major emergency unit in London was meeting its 4-hour A&E waiting target. 24 hours in A&E is a television programme, but it's fast becoming a reality for patients in London and beyond, brought to us by 12 years of Conservative policies, helped in 5 of those years by the Liberal Democrats. Are you concerned that the government's handling of health and the NHS is putting Londoners at risk?
Well, I checked last night in 2010, of the 24 major emergency units in London, of the 24, 23 were seeing patients, 94% of patients, 95% of patients within 4 hours. So 23 out of 24. No, none of them are. And they're a long way short of even the 90s and the 80s. And that's a consequence of austerity for the last 12 years. You can't blame Putin's invasion of Ukraine for this. You can't blame COVID. This is 12 years of austerity, a choice made in 2010, and subsequently now we're embarking on austerity 2.0. I am concerned in relation to what's happening across A&Es, across hospitals, across social care, and the idea that when you've got a massive vacancies in both the NHS and social care, you're treating the workers the way the government is, that will improve things. It's just not the case.
Many of us would have been hopeful following the height of the COVID pandemic, after the clapping for key workers on Thursdays, that we would have a reset in our values in society about how we treat care workers and NHS workers such as our nurses. Whilst we know that you don't have the power in terms of pay negotiations for nursing, one issue where you can support and help key workers is on housing and key worker housing. Are you concerned with the current cost of living crisis and inflation and rising housing costs, that it's making it unaffordable to be a nurse in London? And how can you help and support our key workers with key worker housing in London?
Well, firstly, those care workers who, not just heroic now, but heroic during the pandemic, the idea that it's their fault the virus went into care homes, as being claimed by the celebrity from the jungle, is just astonishing. It was his reckless policies to have patients go from hospitals to care homes without being tested that led to the virus accelerating the way it did in care homes. And I think he should apologise to care workers who he seek to blame for the virus spreading in care homes. In relation to rents in London, one of the things I've said to the government is, one of the things you can do to support care workers, key workers and others is to freeze private rents for the next 2 years. That will save these families £3,000 on average, which is £3,000 I'd rather be in their pocket to spend on heating and food and supporting their families, rather than the pockets of landlords. And the government could very easily do this. Our Labour colleagues in Scotland persuaded the Scottish government to do this. It appears that the government in Westminster has a tin air.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to comment on this nurses' strike. that it's been 106 years since the RSCN has been in existence and there's been no strike at all. What this strike is really about is about patient care. When there's not enough nurses on the wards, they cannot look after patients, right? So when you have a recruitment and retention crisis, and I think you can't do anything about it, but I'll tell you someone who can do something about avert this tension. The strike was Stephen Barclay, the Secretary of State for Health. He should have negotiated with nurses. He should have been in that room taking responsibility for what's happened, and he refused. And this strike could have been averted had he met them. Thank you.
Just two things. Did that come out of Labour's time?
Yes, it did.
Okay, that's fine.
Mr. Mayor, your answer?
So one of the things that I've been struck by is that the Royal College of Nursing, and anybody who knows them, they are an organisation that doesn't strike lightly. As you said, the last time that they voted for strike action was in Victorian times, or shortly thereafter, maybe Edwardian times. And it should cause us concern that the RCN have not only balloted for strike action and are going on strike, but the Secretary of State for Health, who's paid to be Health Secretary, is not willing to meet them to discuss the issue of pay and the other issues you've talked about. And anybody who spent time, as I did, speaking to the nurses who wore some of that gear during the pandemic, you must have worn it as well, Dr. Sahota, sometimes were wearing bin liners because there wasn't enough PPE, that they would strike lightly, or they're somehow money greedy, is ridiculous. These are people who haven't received an above inflation pay increase since at least 2019. Many of them over the last 12 years have received pay increase below inflation, and they're struggling to make ends meet, not just with the energy prices, but also the other cost of living pressures there is. And I think the Health Secretary will regret not meet with them. There's still time for him to meet with them to call off other industrial action.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to bring Assembly Member Bailey in.
Morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
Have you spoken to the Shadow Health Secretary of Labour and asked what kind of pay supplement they would offer? Have you written to maybe the leader of your party and asked what kind of health percentage he would like to offer? He would guarantee. Yeah,
Chair, I think we'll have to have a news flash here, which is that West Streeton and Keir Starmer aren't in government. I wish they were. One of the things that the Prime Minister could do very easily is to call a general election to give the British public a chance to vote for a fresh start under Labour led by Keir Starmer.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I should rephrase it. Do you have an idea how much should be offered? Should I be offered the full amount? Would you?
I'm quite clear. What I'd be doing if I was the Health Secretary is sit down with the RCN and talk through some of the issues that require resolving. It's shoddy the way our public servants are being treated by this government, not just the nurses. The ambulance workers are going out to strike. Our paramedics are going out to strike.
I'm just asking for a figure.
Transport workers are going out to strike.
Mr. Mayor,
doctors are balloting. Teachers are balloting.
Mr. Mayor, you've made that quite clear, and thank you for your comments. I'm just asking you for a number. Have you any idea how much you think should be offered?
Well, listen to what the RCN are saying. The RCN are saying they're willing to negotiate. So the offer the RCN have made isn't the final offer. That's their starting point. And anybody who's actually negotiated will know there's a starting point and there's an end point. Unless you speak, you don't get to the end point.
What would be your start or end point? I'll have either one.
Very easy. The start point is get in the room and meet with them.
Okay,
it's a common courtesy.
Okay, so you'll give that figure. That's fine. I just want to hear it from you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Devonish on bus cuts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. Buses sit at the heart of the city's transport network, providing a cheap, sustainable and convenient way for millions of Londoners and visitors to travel around our city each day. They play a key role in continuing to build a better, greener and fairer city for all Londoners. Transport for London was forced to consider reducing the bus network due to conditions attached by the government to the funding deal that was only required due to the COVID pandemic. TfL consulted on proposals earlier this year and received a huge response from over 20,000 Londoners. I listened to Londoners and was adamant that I would explore every avenue possible to save as many buses as possible. As a result, I've provided additional funding averaging around £25 million per year, which will mean that the vast majority of bus routes proposed to be cut due to the government's funding conditions can now be saved. TfL is now only taking forward proposals in 4 of the 16 neighbourhood areas that were consulted upon. This equates to only around 22% of the reduction in mileage that TfL originally proposed to remove due to the government funding conditions. TfL's consultation included proposals to withdraw route numbers 11, 14, 74 and C3, which serve the Chelsea area. However, the new funding from City Hall means TfL no longer needs to withdraw 14, 74 or C3. That's 3 out of the 4 routes saved. Route 11 will be withdrawn, but to help reduce the impact on Londoners living, working or visiting the area, Route 507 will be extended towards Fulham and renumbered 11. TfL has carefully considered the proposals that will be taken forward, and using the additional funding I've made available, they will now only implement those that will have the least impact on Londoners. The changes that have been made are focused in areas with better than average provision of public transport. TfL keeps the bus network under constant review to ensure it's operating as expected and meets customer demand. As the bus network is the backbone of our public transport network and our most accessible and affordable mode for many, I'll continue to do all I can to protect, improve and grow services across the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Merry Christmas and good morning to you. I don't think I've asked you for a Christmas present in the last 6 years, but this morning I'm going to ask you for a Christmas present because these 2 buses, the 211 and the number 11, are iconic in my part of London. So I appreciate what you've done on the other buses, but will you reconsider your proposals, please, for the 11 and the 211? And if you like, Nikki Aitken, Felicity Buchan, Greg Hands MPs would love to meet with you or your Deputy Mayor and me to look at these 2 because they are the backbone. As you say, buses are the backbone. You are the son of a bus driver. We'd love to save these buses still, please.
Well, Chair, can I thank the member for his question? Listen, I know how important those routes are to your community, and I took seriously the responses made by your community, and thank you for organising the petitions and other things that you organised in your community. The routes that have been saved have only been saved because of City Hall supporting TfL as much as we possibly can. We'll have to make tough choices in the lead up to budget next year as a consequence of switch spending. That £25 million, we've separately provided a loan of £500 million to TfL. We will be able to give you the Christmas present you want if the government steps up and gives us the support that we need. I'm afraid we've got a Prime Minister, and this is where we've got to talk politics, who in Tunbridge Wells was bragging about taking money out of London for areas like Tunbridge Wells. I'd rather that those buses were saved in Chelsea, which has many deprived pockets, rather than Tunbridge Wells.
Well, it is Christmas, Mr. Mayor, so I'm not going to play politics. I just, with great respect, just say that 90% of people in your consultation on the 11 and 92% on the 211 wanted these buses to be saved. Let's not talk about Tunbridge Wells. Let's talk about Chelsea this morning. And if you'd reconsider that, I'd be hugely grateful because these are important. You know, the number 11 has been there since 1906. And they are central to the community, right through from Fulham to the City of London. So please consider that, and I'll leave it there, Chair.
Chair, there is still time to save those buses if the government steps up. What I'd say to those 3 MPs that the member referred to is they've got a direct route to the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Secretary of State. And if the government wants to give us the money we deserve and we need to help our national economy be supported, I'd be more than willing to make those changes that's been asked for by the member.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is the name of Assembly Member Murmay on the impact of the...
It's my question.
Sorry,
next.
I did. You're absolutely right, Assembly Member. Because it was in yellow, I sort of didn't read it, so I missed it. But anyway, it's in the Assembly Member Pigeon's name on the dial right.
Chair, I think you may be thinking about a leaflet rather than the question, but thank you. Dial right helps people across London live rich and independent lives, and I'm proud that TfL continues to provide the dial right service, especially given the challenges TfL has faced over the last 2 years. We want older and disabled Londoners to be able to use public transport, walking and cycling as much as possible, but we know there are journeys when that just won't be suitable and that some people need a bit more support to get around. Dial-A-Ride is a vital service in these cases. It's a free service for members, and membership is also free. People can join the scheme for a variety of reasons, including different disabilities or age-related mobility challenges. I'm pleased that TfL's most recent survey found that customer satisfaction amongst Dial-A-Ride users currently stands at 93%. Interviews for Age UK London and Transport for All's recent reports show that users value it for bringing independence, choice and control to people's lives. However, I'm aware that the service does experience some issues, and I know that the service can still be improved. TfL and I are committed to ensuring that Dial-A-Ride users have the best service possible available to them. TfL has now reviewed and responded to the recommendations made in Age UK and Transport for All's recent report on the service. Work towards a number of these recommendations is already underway, and TfL is now looking to implement work on others. TfL has recruited staff to reduce call waiting times and has plans for a new, simple booking system to be implemented next year, with current users involved in its development and design. TfL is also undertaking additional coaching to ensure staff are equipped to provide better service on the phone, and call quality is regularly being monitored. All staff have undertaken disability equality training. Drivers undertake training in dementia awareness and safeguarding, as well as how to support customers with mobility needs. TfL is planning to review its training to refresh the content and incorporate specific modules and elements such as neurodiversity. Current funding and resource restriction mean that TfL is limited in what it can do on some of the other recommendations in the report. This includes providing journeys over longer distances, extended operating hours, and ensuring a minimum number of weekly journeys. TfL will, though, continue to keep recommendations under consideration.
Thank you for your answer. The Dial-A-Ride service is advertised as being available from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Yet the majority of drivers' contracts finish at 10 o'clock and stipulate they have to be back at the depot 15 minutes before their shift ends. If you then factor in drive time, the last bookings are often 8:30 in the evening, hardly a night out, and nothing like the service you are advertising. Now, one group I have been working with is Havering Learning Disability Society, which has a monthly disco until 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. It's absolutely the highlight of the month, and yet for many members, Dial-A-Ride will come and pick them up at 8:30, leaving many members upset as they have to leave a party just as it's getting started. Will you personally review this and give some festive joy to the many Dial-A-Ride users who want to go and enjoy a Christmas or New Year party and have a social life?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will. I read the minutes of the meeting you had with TfL and the community there, and I saw the point that was being made. What the members are alluding to is, although Dial-A-Ride operates till 10 p.m, as a consequence of what's been said, many of the services don't actually go until 10 p.m. It's not the offer on the tin. So I will personally take that away and look into what we can do, because she's spot on. It's a quality of life issue, actually, and and older people do want to go out a bit later, and 8:30 is not later. So can I assure the member I will personally look at this myself and see what we can do to make sure it does what it says on the tin, which is you can get Dial-A-Ride up until 10 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, this is happening. Obviously, I've focused my work with this group at the moment, but this is happening across London. Disabled people excluded from activities and that regular social life, and particularly after COVID, so important. You've mentioned the Age UK London and Transport for All report, and that's something I was happy to support and did the foreword for over the summer. There are some key recommendations in that. I appreciate there is an issue around funding, but being able to make some longer journeys, having a guaranteed minimum of perhaps 3 return journeys per week, and say extending the operating hours, just going to 10 o'clock that's advertised, which you've agreed to review. Will you perhaps look at this further? Because the response from TfL was actually really negative to the recommendations. Whilst you say they're implementing some, it didn't reflect the conversation we had with all group leads and users at a meeting I hosted. So will you look at that? And I'm happy to work with your Deputy Mayor, if necessary, to really review this to see if we can get this service improved.
Sure. I mean, to do justice to the reports, there were 12 recommendations. I think all of them are being actioned. The 3 I mentioned in my answer, where I've got to be honest and candid, is the issue about the longer journeys. That's why the taxi card deal with the longer journeys going forward. The extended operating hours, we did look at going back to midnight. And actually it was only 1% of users, but you've got all these staff until midnight. And that's why I think it's a very reasonable request from the member for me to go and make sure 10 p.m. means 10 p.m. and ensuring a minimum number of journeys. The issue with the minimum number of journeys is actually many of the users use more than 3 times a week. And if you have a minimum number of journeys, you're in danger of then being able to have more than 3 times, and others have the minimum number of 3, not using the 3 times. And so there is a situation where some people use it more than 3, some people use less than 3, and it works pretty well. But I'm more than happy for the Deputy Mayor to meet with the member. I really have found her advice over the last 6 years really useful. Often we can move things along and find a way forward, and I'm sure that the Deputy Mayor and her can come to some agreement which benefits Londoners but also is affordable as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you for that. The next question is a member of Assembly Member Miami on the impact of the cap of social rent rises.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. Yes, I am concerned about the impact the cap will have on both Londoners and London's social housing programme. I've raised these concerns in my response to the recent government's consultation on the social rent cap. In my response, I expressed support for the 7% cap, but on the condition that it be accompanied by a government-funded rent rebate for households who cover their social rent payments from their own wallet and for shared owners, meaning that their rents would effectively be frozen at current levels. I also called again for the benefit cap to be scrapped to help affected households through the cost of living crisis. The rent rebate would not cost councils and housing associations anything extra, as it would be covered by the government's savings in the benefits bill, which should have been much higher if social rent increases had followed the long-term rent settlement of CPI plus 1%, rather than being capped. The government's own impact assessment puts the welfare savings to government expenditure at £3 billion. I do share your concerns over the impact of the rent settlement on the supply of new social homes. That is why I'm calling for more investment from the government to respond to London's chronic levels of housing need, which are at risk of increasing further due to the cost of living crisis facing Londoners. City Hall research in partnership with Savills, published on the 1st of December, found a £4.4 billion annual shortfall in the government subsidy required to build the affordable housing London needs. Social landlords' ability to upgrade existing homes to meet quality and environmental standards must also be protected. We need to ensure all existing homes are warm and safe. The tragic death of 2-year-old Awab Ishaq, who died following exposure to mould in social housing flat in Rochdale, demonstrates how serious an issue this is. I've recently called for the government to provide emergency investment to accelerate progress in assuring all social housing in London meets the decent home standard and reaches an EPC rating of at least C.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Khan. Like you, I share that concern about the impact of the 7% cap on making sure that homes are decent and on a much-needed retrofit programme in order to make sure that homes are long-term sustainable and economically viable for the people that live in them in terms of their energy costs. So I'm just wondering how that might impact how homes that currently exist would be impacted by the 7% cap, because obviously that's a big commitment around our net zero goals as well.
Yeah, I mean, the big problem is, and you know this, you meet often with not just councils but also registered providers. They've got a real problem here in relation to they've got to deal with the legacy of Grenfell, making sure the homes are safe, issues around decent standards, the climate challenge, as well as building more homes. And that's why we desperately need more support from the government. You've talked about this in the past. The work done, which showed there's a £4.4 billion gap each year in the monies we need in London versus the monies the government has given. And although I welcome, obviously, people having less of an increase in their rent than otherwise would be the case, unless the government supports those who don't get the benefit of that, supports the registered providers, I worry about the legacy of this being felt long term.
And so on that point about alongside councils, registered providers, the London Housing Directors Group has said that the rent freeze is £108 million loss in income to their housing revenue accounts, and that's on top of the losses felt through COVID, and that in addition on top of the losses through the 1% cap over 4 years that councils had. And I just wonder, in terms of balancing those needs around both maintenance, retrofit, but also building those new homes, what does that mean for making sure that we do meet the targets set in both of the affordable homes programmes? Because obviously that is a massive risk. We're already facing inflation across those build costs.
Yeah, so we've had a number of housing providers, but independent experts confirmed that the inflation in the construction sector is north of 16%. And so the grants that they've agreed to do, it's very difficult to achieve new homes in the grant levels agreed because of construction inflation north of 16%. By the way, the inflation for remediation is at 14%, so it's a real struggle that they've got. And that's why I think Tom Copley was explaining this week it's going to be very difficult to meet the targets, and that's one of the reasons why the government's abandoned its targets. The government had a target of 300,000 new homes a year, which has been abandoned, and you'll have seen the government's caved in relation to planning reform as well. And so I think the reality is for the foreseeable future, with this government and the lack of funding and lack of support, we're not going to be getting the homes we desperately need.
Thank you. The next question is the name of Assembly Member Sheikh on the GLA house building capacity.
Thank you, Chair. I've welcomed Lord Kerslake's recommendations on how a City Hall developer could operate effectively and how it could be should be established. I will set up a City Hall developer over 2 stages. First, I'm expanding the GLA's existing housing development activities and completing a 5-year business plan focused on land assembly, controlled land disposals and joint ventures. Second, I will consider how the direct delivery of homes should be approached in the future. I've already committed funding for implementation and increased staff in my 2022-2023 budget, and officers are reviewing further options for future funding. Within a context of increased GLA group collaboration, officers are now working to set up the necessary organisational structures and explore the options for a City Hall developer. This has included engagement with the wider development and housing sector and the creation of a working group with the private sector facilitated by Business London and PwC, as well as a GLA Group housing delivery working group. This engagement will directly inform the preparation of the City Hall developer business plan to be published next year. The Kerslake review also provided a framework for taking a significant step forward in maximising new genuinely affordable homes on GLA Group land. I've appointed Lynn Garner, current Chief Executive of LLDC, as a new Senior Professional Lead for GLA Group Housing Delivery. My Deputy Mayor for Housing and Residential Development, Tom Copley, has established a New Homes for Londoners Board subcommittee to oversee GLA Group Housing Delivery, with the first meeting held in November. Alongside this work, significant progress has been made to expand the existing Small Sites, Small Builders programme and to review and enhance the London Development Panel. The creation of a new City Hall developer is an ambitious project which will deliver genuinely affordable homes for Londoners, and my team are working at pace to make it a reality.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, and Merry Christmas to you and everyone who's joining us today in the audience. Well, that's really, really exciting, because I think your ambition to set up a City Hall developer is one that's warmly received by the Labour group. I think it will further your ambition on ensuring that we deliver the affordable housing that Londoners need, and it's been a clear year-on-year improvement since your mayoralty. So I just wanted to drill down into, getting us even more excited about the possibility of this and look at it in the context of the LLDC and the OPDC. So obviously, as you've heard from the chair at the beginning of the meeting, we've had a sort of different variety of scrutiny over the MDCs recently. And with the LLDC, as much as there's been some really fantastic things delivered, the affordable housing that's been built could have been better. So it'd be good to hear what you think a City Hall developer would have enabled had it previously existed with the LLDC, and then transferring that over to with the OPDC, what we could hope for a City Hall developer in terms of their being able to achieve their affordable housing targets.
Good question. So with the Olympic Park with LLDC, the biggest mistake made there, a number of mistakes made there, notwithstanding the great achievements, is the lack of a plan to have more genuinely affordable homes, right? I mean, when I took over in 2016, very few homes were affordable. Those that weren't genuinely affordable. 8% market value is not affordable. And so we're dealing with a legacy of mistakes made in the past in relation to the previous London plan and permissions granted, which we can't retrospectively change. So the new London plan and our policy of 50% affordable, 35% fast track has led to a sea change. So since I've become mayor, there's been a big improvement in genuinely affordable homes, but we can't make up for the homes granted permission before that clearly aren't genuinely affordable. The value added of a City Hall developer with a mayor on the side of Londoners is you can make sure that you have, if there's a case where a joint venture is not working, you can yourself be the developer to get homes built that otherwise wouldn't be built. And LLDC is a good example of, since 2016, the change we've made. And Lynn Garner's expertise in changing what's happened at LDC is the reason why she's the best person to lead on this. And it is really important on these massive brownfield sites. We see one in OPDC. We take advantage of these because once they're built, they're built. You can't unbuild them and build genuinely affordable homes. That's your opportunity at the beginning. So Old Common is a massive, massive opportunity. You see the development in Barking Riverside, Thamesmead and elsewhere. Huge potential there for the homes that we desperately, desperately need. So we need support from the government financially. As I said in answer to some members, Moima, we need £4.4 billion additional funding, but the City Hall developer will add the value to the private sector and registered providers to make sure we get the development. If it's the case, we can't get joint ventures.
Thank you. And then just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I mean, in terms of the wider culture, what sort of broader additional benefits do you think a City Hall developer would have compared with a private developer as we go forward, trying to maybe even reform the culture around development?
The two big things is greater certainty and more public benefits being maximised, and that's what people want. They want more, planning gain is the jargon we used to use, but also there's the certainty of knowing that there's going to be somebody else to step in if we can't get progress with the private sector.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Hall. It's on manifesto commitments.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I'm incredibly proud of all the work my team and officers across the GLA have undertaken to deliver the manifesto on which I was re-elected last year with the biggest ever mandate for a sitting mayor. Despite the challenging backdrop of dealing with the post-pandemic social and economic fallout, a series of Prime Ministers and Secretaries of State, and the deepening macroeconomic crisis we find ourselves in, I'm pleased to report we've made significant progress. We've launched London's largest ever international and domestic tourism campaign, Let's Do London, which has brought £285 million worth of gross value added and over 60,000 visitors to London, supporting our tourism industry. We've started building more council homes in London than at any point since 1970. We've expanded the world-leading ultra-emission zone to an area 18 times the size of the original Central London, reducing toxic air in Central London by almost a half and in Inner London by a third, meaning millions of more Londoners are breathing cleaner air, and we're helping to tackle the climate emergency. We've delivered the Elizabeth line and reopened the night tube, improving connectivity across our city. We're working with Sir Mark Rowley, our new reforming commissioner in the police, to increase trust and confidence and bring about positive reform of the police. We've invested nearly £2 million to help young Londoners exit criminal gangs. We've invested £150,000 in a new programme to support London's under-pressure nurseries and childminders. We've invested £2 million in planting new trees across the city. We've funded 3 new nighttime enterprise zones. We're working with Thames Water to successfully install, Thames Water to successfully install 110 water fountains that have already provided more than 780,000 litres of drinking water, saving the equivalent of more than 1.5 million plastic bottles, and the list goes on and on for this term alone. This is a condensed mayoral term of 3 years, Chair. I'm extremely proud of what we've already achieved and what we have in the pipeline to deliver over the next 18 months. In the GLA Mayor budget, I will set out the details of how we plan to deliver on my manifesto going forward, and the forthcoming draft GLA Group budget will show how the functional bodies and the MPS will continue to fund their relevant communities. Taken together, it's a multi-billion-pound budget aimed at delivering a safer, greener, faster and more prosperous London for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad you're pleased and proud, because when I looked at this question and of your manifesto promises, I was awash with things that hadn't gone so well, so maybe we'll have a little look at those. On page 36, 49, 62, or all of those of your 2021 manifesto, you mentioned transparency, and indeed in February 2020 you tweeted that you were, and I quote, proud to be the most open and transparent Mayor of London ever. Do you still think that's true?
Oh, without doubt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad somebody's got faith in you, even if it's just yourself. On the 22nd of November, during the Budget and Performance Committee, we were discussing the decision that had been made or would be made on the ULEZ extension, because we were, of course, looking at all the money that had been put aside. And your Chief of Staff said it has not, as in, been decided for avoidance of doubt. Can you please be specific and say exactly what time and day you made that decision to go ahead with the ULEZ extension?
So the question is what time, on what day?
Yeah, when did you exactly decide to go ahead with the ULEZ?
I mean, I'm not sure what time I had breakfast this morning, let alone what time I made the decision. So I'm happy to write
It's funny, you've got a very good memory for some things. Can you concentrate on this specific? When did you decide to go against the majority of people in Outer London to put in the ULEZ extension? So when did you decide to do that? So
I received a report from TfL on a Friday, which I read over the weekend. And it took some more time during the course of that week. And I think I made my decision public on the Friday following. The Friday I received the report from TfL, and some members of the Assembly were at the announcement in Lewisham. And so it had been in the days preceding the Friday when I publicly announced my decision to expand the ultra-low emission zone so it would cover all of London. Until the report had been done by the independent consultants, I had not seen the results of the consultation, and the report, which is publicly available, and there are also some various additional complements to the report. I think the independent integrated impact assessment and a few other documents which I read during the course of the days preceding the Friday.
Well, it's very lucky that all that money was put aside so that you could do it. Then, wasn't it? If there was no decision at all on the 22nd of November, yet you gave your decision on the 25th with miraculously enough money in there to do it. And you think that's credible, do you?
I think it's incredibly credible.
Credible.
That we've got a mayor who is willing to take action where the national government and the former mayor aren't. What we've done is announce a policy that will build on the success of the ULEZ in central London and inner London, which has already seen a reduction of toxic air by almost half in central, and a further 20-30% in inner. And it's those in outer London who are suffering the worst consequences of air pollution, but also will be tackling the additional challenges of climate change and congestion.
Well, I think it's incredibly incredible that that went through, especially when so many people do not want it to go in. I'm moving on to the fire brigade now, and I'm very surprised that you did not mention in your brief words with us at the beginning of this meeting that it had been put into special measures, because of course that is very serious. So, looking at your manifesto again, do you believe that you've upheld your manifesto commitment to push for the LFB to be an attractive and safe place to work, even though the cultural review shows the opposite of that?
Well, I think it's evidence of a manifesto commitment being completed is not just my appointment of a reforming commissioner, Andy Rowe, but it was Andy Rowe who himself asked for a review to be undertaken by the former deputy head of the CPS, Nazir Afzal. It was this commissioner who asked for that cultural review to be undertaken by Nazir Afzal, but also this commissioner who, unlike any government department, has completed the vast majority of Grenfell recommendations, which go to many of the concerns that we had, which is bringing about the change that we need. And the only reason the HMI decided to go into the engaged process was because of the transparency that the Commissioner had showed in asking Nazir Afzal to do the work. And actually, working with the further support from the HMI, it shows we've got a Commissioner determined to make a change. But also in the fire service, we've got an FBU who wants there to be change. I just wish the chairman of the Police Federation would also want change in the police service as well.
Oh, I thought you'd have a go at him as well, because you seem to have a go at him whenever. But of course, you remind us all that the police are in special measures, the fire brigade are in special measures. You've been in charge of London for 6 years, nearly 7. Thank you, Assembly Member. Nearly 7 years, and we are in special measures with the police, the fire, and of course TfL was kept going by government money. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairman.
I think it's a question, Chair, isn't it? Surely.
No, that was a statement. You really ought to know statements of fact.
Assembly Member Hall knows this is Mayor's question time, and there must be a question there, because this is Mayor's question time.
There is. I think. Look, Chair. I think the idea.
But don't make statements here. We ask questions. Pardon? What's this? I ask questions. Where? I asked a question. I came on intervention under an area which I was allowed to.
You didn't even pass to the deputy chair first.
I did. Can you please withdraw that? I did pass it to the deputy. Thank you. Look, let's carry on. I do know that this is a question which has a lot of interest, and there are 6 other Assembly members who want to come in, at least 6 or 7. But let me bring in Assembly Member Best in first, please.
Okay. Thanks.
I think let's proceed, right? Okay. I think this is Christmas, right? Let's be kind to the Tories on this case. Okay.
That will be the day. Thank you.
Okay. Assembly Member Best.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Mayor, on page 11 of your 2021 manifesto, you refer to social care workers as our new heroes. Professor Martin Green from Care England said recently regarding your ULEZ expansion that the £12.50 daily charge would be an enormous pressure on carers and to the NHS, and that they already have huge problems getting staff, particularly to deliver care in people's homes, and extending the ULEZ is going to make it even worse. On another page of your manifesto, you refer to charities as the soul of London. We have many small charities that are trying to make a big difference, and we know they've been hit by the ULEZ that exists already. For example, Dogs on the Streets. And I was at a food hub just 2 weeks ago, and they were giving a presentation, and literally on the slide of revenue, they were showing the damage the existing ULEZ has done to them. That's a hub that doesn't even exist within the zone, but that's just when they have to cross the boundary. So given next year there would always be in it, that would be a huge cost. What I'd like to know today is what we can do, particularly for carers and NHS workers, to either exempt them entirely or to create a sunset period to give them some exemption where they cannot access a scrappage scheme. And I'd like us to do the same, make the same commitment for small charities that cannot access the scrappage scheme. And I can see 2 ways in which you can do this. You could deflect this and say that's not really your problem, that's the government, they should do more to help. Or we can talk like adults and accept that there were people that lost when you extended the last ULEZ. There are people doing overwhelming public good that will be hit by the extension of the ULEZ, and you have the power, as you were saying to an Assembly member earlier, there are certain things that you can do to protect these people, and can you commit to doing that?
Well, Chair, I've been noting that question took 3 minutes. I hope I'll be given the same courtesy in relation to time I'm allowed to answer that question. So let me be clear. That the evidence I've had for the last 6 years is this side of the Assembly doesn't really care about care workers or charities, but are using them as a Trojan horse to attack the ultra-low emission zone because they think that's the way to kick the can down the road to take action in relation to cleaning up the toxic air in our city, which is leading to 4,000 premature deaths a year. And I'd remind this Assembly, the same people opposed the ULEZ in central London, and the same people opposed the ULEZ in inner London, and again suddenly found affection for care workers and charities that's missing from every policy from this government.
I think I found affection for a care worker when I married one, Mr Mayor. So I think you should actually stop attacking me personally and answer the question.
Assembly Member Best. Look, the Mayor listens to your questions, and I want him to listen to the question very carefully. But I think also I want the Assembly members to respect the Mayor and listen to his response. So can you please stop intervening? It doesn't make the proceedings any more effective. So what we've got, Chair, a session where we are working with care workers to see what we can do to support them when the ultra-emission zone is expanded in August 2023. And I hope to make an announcement in relation to that by January the 30th when we launch the scrappage scheme. In relation to the charities, we will be making an announcement in relation to support given to charities, also micro businesses, also sole traders, also disabled Londoners, and also low-income families. And some of those responses will include grace periods being extended. But there is a fact that we can't escape, that all this has been done without any support from the national government, who found the funds to give support to other cities around the country having smaller clean air zones, but are unwilling to support London. And if members in the Assembly who claim to care so passionately about charities and care workers, who are members of the same party, really did so, they'd be lobbying their government.
Mr Mayor, you don't need funds to exempt those the small charities that I'm talking about that won't even be that many people, but if they cannot access the scrappage scheme, can you just say that they are safeguarded? Because they're having a torrid time at the moment, wondering if they can make it through this. And that's the same for carers and key workers. I'm asking you to protect them. You can throw whatever personal insult you want at me. It's not a slanging match about me. They want that protection. Please, can you just assure them that they have it, and you will make sure that they do not lose out as of next year?
Well, Chair, we are speaking to care workers. We're speaking to charities. Charities, of course, whose business is unfortunately booming as a consequence of government policies, need every support they can be given. We'll do what we can to support them. We've almost doubled the size of the scrappage scheme from where it was in the previous schemes. It was £61 million in the previous schemes. It's going to be £110 million in the current scheme. We'll be publishing on January the 30th details of the scrappage scheme, the grace periods and the exemptions. And before that happens, we'll be speaking more frequently than we currently are to care workers and others who often have to use their car. I'd remind the Assembly that as a consequence of our policies, now 94% of vehicles in London are compliant. 85% of vehicles outside of the inland zone are compliant. Almost half of Londoners don't own a car. And our policies will save the NHS £5 billion over the course of the next few years, but also save businesses more than £1.6 billion, and also save charities a huge sum of money in relation to some of the work they do with those who are suffering as a consequence of respiratory issues.
Okay, thank you. The next one, Assembly Member Rogers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr Mayor. June's Mayor's Question Time, you and I had an exchange reference a pledge on page 98 of your manifesto where you promised to work with TfL on a strategy for the suburbs. You said that work on that had effectively been paused until the long-term capital funding deal was agreed with government. What progress have you since made on that strategy for the suburbs?
Well, I'm really pleased, Chair, to have announced last week or 10 days ago that the first part of that policy to support the suburbs is an additional 1.1 million kilometres of new buses in the suburbs from as early as next year. We've already announced some policies in transport to help these suburbs, from the extension of Bark and Riverside train service to the Elizabeth line extending to Outer London. In answer to a question from Caroline Pigeon, I took on board the concerns raised by Havering, which is in the suburbs, in relation to the importance of dial-a-ride, where there isn't great public transport for older people, a free service. We provide many of our policies in relation to adult education are supporting the suburbs in relation to giving people the skills they need to get better remuneration if they're on the minimum wage, or if they're not working, to get free training to get better remuneration. We'll be announcing more policies over the course of the next few weeks and months.
You did at that meeting, you said you'd write to me with details of what you were doing. I haven't received that letter yet. Could you follow through on that, please?
I'll chase that up, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on to page 100 of your manifesto, which is about Vision Zero. And your commitment to a programme of pedestrian crossings at junctions that are lacking them. And in recent weeks, I've had a number of residents and councillors come to me from Chiswick to raise the issue of the junction of Hartington Road and the A316, which is an incredibly busy junction. There are pedestrian crossing points, but they are unsignalled. And there are concerns that have been raised from residents and councillors as it's used by cyclists, kids using nearby sports facilities and that sort of thing. There was recent utilities work, and the utilities contractors actually put in temporary traffic signalling, which did have pedestrian phasing, but then that was removed, went back to the previous TfL state with no pedestrian phasing, which is less safe. So I wonder, in the spirit of goodwill, whether you could take that one away and look into it and prioritise getting pedestrian signalling at that junction.
Yeah, Chair, apologies. I don't know the detail. I'm more than happy to take that away and stuff and look into that. That's really important. Can I tell you, I'll get back before Christmas to see what we can do about that.
That'd be appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next is Assembly Member Garrett.
Hi. Sorry, it's me.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Let me turn my mic on. Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to return to this question of transparency, really, the most transparent mayor of London. And the document, which I assume you've now had time to read, which Sir Tom Windsor gave you on Tuesday when we were here previously at the Police and Crime Committee, which was the document that was released from your office on the day that his report was released. You claimed on Tuesday that it didn't personally attack Sir Tom. Assuming that you've now had time to read it, do you stand by that?
No, I've not had a chance to read it. No, I've not seen it.
Okay, well, I mean, I have it here. It says, I should say my favourite bit of this whole document, released by the Mayor's press office, starts, "A source close to the Mayor of London said." So we're all left in great mysterious doubt about who that could be. But, for example, it suggests that Sir Tom Windsor has a history of delivering for his Conservative political masters. Sir Tom has made his party political allegiance clear, but we know that he's been a Labour Party member for decades. I think he said since before you were able to vote.
I think that's not the evidence. What he said was he used to be a member of the Labour Party, and he stopped being a member some time ago.
You think he is? Okay, so when you say that he is politically aligned with the Conservative Party, you don't think that's a personal attack on Sir Tom?
I'm responding to you what the evidence of Sir Thomas Windsor was, which is he used to be a member of the Labour Party when John Smith and Donald Dewar, who passed away a long time ago, I'm afraid, who were his inspiration. He's not been a member for some time. But he's welcome to join, as indeed you are.
Well, I think
a lot of people are joining our party. And in the spirit of goodwill, I can send you a membership form.
On Tuesday, Mr.
you don't need to cross over the floor immediately.
Don't just monologue. On Tuesday, I think you referred to him as a firebrand socialist. I don't know how many of those we have in the Conservative Party. I haven't checked, but I suspect not very many. I don't know. I don't know whether you know, Mr. Mayor. Not everyone speaks very highly of you. You probably have heard that. Personally, I mean, I have a more nuanced view. So I've noticed you sit here for hours taking questions on many topics, and you have your big binder full of information with all your little tabs in, but you don't really refer to it very often. You mostly have the relevant, or the ones that you choose to remember, facts and figures sort of off the top of your head. And this whole Sir Tom Windsor, well, not the Sir Tom Windsor business, the sacking of Cressida Dick business, I think you described as either you or she were going to lose their career over it. So clearly this is a very high stakes sort of political situation you were in. And yet your usually very excellent memory seems to fail. We have this, this document from your office, which you apparently know nothing about, still haven't had a chance to read, apparently. We had on the 2nd of February the meeting where Baby P came up in the context. Even with months of time to think about it, you've not been able to come up with a single way in which Baby P might have been relevant to that conversation. And then we have your Chief of Staff, who seems to have gone rogue, negotiating on your behalf with the Met Police about the terms for the contractual departure of the former Commissioner, apparently without your authorisation, without your knowledge. And most surprising of all for me about all of this is apparently without any curiosity. We sat there for more than 6 hours, you and I and the other members of the Police and Crime Committee, listening to evidence on this. And the thing that strikes me is you not only seem to have these memory blanks about this whole issue, you don't, even when you thought your career was at risk, you don't seem curious about any of these incidents. Do you really think that the version of events that you've presented to Londoners is actually plausible?
Senator Garrett, I'm just concerned, right? Is this question linked to manifesto commitment? Were any of these commitments made in the in the manifesto? I just want to make sure that we are following the rule books.
So,
hang on, Assemblymember Hall, Assemblymember Garrett is able to answer the question.
So I do apologise that my voice is not as clear and strong as it might normally be, but I believe I said at the beginning that I was referring to the Mayor's commitment, as was Assemblymember Hall, to be the most transparent Mayor of London ever. And I fear it is difficult to do that if you are presenting a version of events to Londoners, which I would hazard to suggest is not only not true, but is not even plausible. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, I just want to make sure there was a link to the question.
Thank you.
Well, Chair, I'm not sure if that's a question or a monologue for a Twitter clip.
Is it?
The point of the beginning.
You want me to read the whole question again, Chair?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
No. The question was perfectly clear. Your usually excellent memory suddenly fails you on all of the events around what you described as an event where you thought your career may be at risk. Suddenly your memory fails on all of these issues. Is it really plausible, do you think, your version of events?
I think at the beginning of the monologue was reference to how unliked I am. Just remind the member, 1.3 million Londoners liked me in 2016.
I said people don't speak highly of you.
1.3 million Londoners spoke highly enough highly enough of me to vote for me in 2016. And another figure that I remember is 1.2 million.
You see, I noticed,
1.2 million.
You see, I noticed that you're not
Assemblymember
answering
Garrett,
the question.
can you
You're
please,
monologuing and repeating your talking
Assemblymember
points.
Garrett, can you please have the courtesy now to listen to the Mayor? Because the Mayor listens to you silently. And I want to listen to the answer of the Mayor. Thank you.
Even if it's on a completely different topic, Chair. If he's just
Look,
monologuing on
I
his own
allowed you a
talking
lot of
points.
leverage. I allowed you a lot of latitude.
But
hang on. Now, please let me have the answer for the Mayor. I want to hear. Londoners want to hear.
I look forward to hearing it.
Well, Chair, I'm quite clear. I stand by my decision to be on the side of, those Londoners who felt let down by the former commissioners.
These are your talking points. I know them because I have your briefing. My question was, do you think your memory lapses
Assemblymember Garrett, I will not let you keep intervening. Let the Mayor answer the question, please. It may not be the answer you want, but let the Mayor answer the question,
I don't
please.
mind what answer he gives if it's to the same question.
Mr. Mayor, over to you.
Well, I'm quite clear. I stand by my decision to be on the side of those Londoners who felt let down by the failure of the former Commissioner to deal with the systemic cultural issues that infected the police service and the failure to have a plan to win back the trust and confidence of Londoners. Due process was followed. There's obvious reason why the Deputy Commissioner appointed by the former Commissioner after he left his job in Scotland and appointed the Deputy Commissioner, made the Assistant Commissioner, who then wrote to Priti Patel, that virtue and bastion of treating staff well, to look into a report into the removal of the Commissioner, and then asked Sir Tom Windsor, who had a very cosy supper, we now discover,
with the Mayor of London,
at the Wolseley in the Piccadilly Circus, paid for.
You are conscious that none of this relates to my question, yes?
I think the Mayor understands your question. The Mayor is giving you the answer.
Okay.
And hang on. And let the Mayor I'm not sure the Mayor has finished. Have you finished, Mr. Mayor?
No, he's not going to finish for hours. I've got 7 pages
and that's
of
the
his
risk you
talking
ran
points.
when you asked the question.
Excuse me, Chair. Chair, can I say then? I think
Chair,
I
can
think
we
it's
not
obvious.
please have Assemblymember Garrett say again? He should allow the Mayor to answer the question that's
The Mayor
been
is not
asked
answering
in the
it.
way that he sees fit.
Is this using Labour
I too
time?
was
Is
in
this
that
Labour
committee meeting,
intervention on my
Assemblymember
question?
Garrett, and I remember
Garrett.
exactly what was said. So you deciding to misconstrue what was said, let the Mayor answer the question.
Hang on. Hang on. Look,
Mr. Mayor,
let me just remind Assembly members, I'm chairing the Assembly at the moment. And can you please let me do that? And I'm saying the Mayor can answer the question. When members of Assembly ask questions, they're important questions. They're important questions. Londoners want to hear the answers. And I want the Mayor to give the answer which Londoners want to hear. Simple as that. We ask this question because they're important.
Chair, if it helps, I know nothing I say will assuage the member who supports Cressida Dick to the death. Londoners know who was right and who was wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think the non-answer answers the question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chair. I shall end my question.
I'm happy to answer, Chair, but he won't let me. He's just rude and interrupting every opportunity.
I think the Londoners have been watching this on the webcast. We've all been watching. But anyway, let's proceed because I think otherwise we'll be here using more of this conservative time inappropriately. But
excuse me, can I just be clear,
Yeah.
Chair, that when the Labour member was interrupting, that wasn't on the Conservative clock, was it? The clock sometimes.
So I don't
updates
want
and
this
sometimes
assembly to be
it
turned
doesn't.
into a bilateral conversation between assembly members. Can we please ask questions to the mayor? Hang on.
didn't ask the
I'm
assembly member
reminding all
Mohammed
of
to be
you,
quiet.
please, all of you. You ask a question to the mayor answers the questions. If those questions are important, ask them. If they're not important, then don't ask them, please.
Chair, could I suggest you ask the Mayor to stop filibustering and it would stop a lot of this?
I wish. I've never, ever stopped assembly members asking the questions the way they want to ask it. And because you have a freedom to do so, I will not stop the mayor asking questions the way he wants to answer them. So I never stop you, any of you, using your time appropriate as you see fit. You can use time as much as you want to, and if you prevent me from interrupting, I won't interrupt. The answer is, don't give me the opportunity to interrupt. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Boff.
On page 5 of your manifesto, you said you will continue the record-breaking progress made on increasing the numbers of genuinely affordable homes being built across London. Are you confident that, therefore, that you are going to meet the affordable housing target you agreed with the government by March 2023?
Thank you for your question. So the good news is we've met every target so far that the government has set us in relation to genuinely affordable homes, in relation to council homes, I think the most since the 1970s, genuinely affordable homes, the most since records began. We are speaking to the government because of the concerns raised by the government in relation to housing targets, but also the concerns raised by the industry in relation to construction inflation. To echo the words of the Deputy Mayor earlier on this week, it's going to be incredibly difficult. I think he said earlier on this year, it's going to be almost impossible to reach the targets. One of the things that we do know is the government's cognizant of that is the industry. So it's going to be a stretch to get near the target. We're going to work incredibly hard to do as many as we can. Just to remind the colleague, though, the good news is we've got another deal from 2021 to 2026. So any slippage from the deal from 16 to 23 can obviously go into the 21 to 26, hoping that the OBR and the Bank of England are right that inflation should come down to a large extent next year and the year after, which will help things in the subsequent year.
You often complain about a lack of resources from the government on all sorts of issues. Why is it, therefore, that the record-breaking amount of money that the government has allocated to you still has, after 6 years, over £500 million unallocated in the affordable housing budget?
That's not true. That's an old figure you're using.
Which figure is it then?
It's a lot less than that. I can write to them. It's a lot less than that because deals were done since the figure the member refers to. Just to remind the member that the deal with the government in 2016 was before the various things that have affected construction of homes, not least the recent construction inflation. On top of that, the consequences of Brexit in relation to the supply line and labour shortages. Notwithstanding that, records have been broken. But I'm happy to drop him a note before Christmas to let him know if there is still any unallocated money. I know that the figure was also mentioned by him at a People's Question Time, and I did check, and that figure is not the figure he said.
Right, because your Deputy Mayor was unwilling to tell us what that figure was.
I don't know about that, but I'm more than happy to write to him to let him know what the figure is.
And when you've, are you? It's an interesting point that you're basically slipping the programme into the next programme. Can you share with Londoners how much of the next programme is being allocated, bearing in mind that that was given to you in 2021?
So firstly, it's not correct to say that these are record-breaking deals from the government. The Labour government in 2008 gave a record-breaking deal to the then Mayor, which led to the massive increase in term one of home building in London. The problem then was a lot of that wasn't taken forward in term two of the previous Mayor. So in relation to the 2016 to 2021 deal, we aren't yet sure what slippage there will be. I'm just being frank with the member who's asked a very direct question about the possibility and the likelihood of there being slippage. What I'm saying is that if the predictions are right for inflation to come down next year and further reduction in the year after, that should give us some comfort that we can make up some of the ground lost. And so those are conversations we'll have nearer the end of this financial year with the relevant department, Michael Gove's department.
Is the record trying to break the record for missing your affordable housing target by the widest margin, because that's the way it's going?
Well, that's not the case, though, is it? Because we've broken the records for most council homes begun since the 1970s for a number of years.
Council homes, Mr. Mayor, is only a small proportion of the affordable housing budget.
We've also broken the record.
Only makes up 29% of your
well, let me do it. We've also broken the record for most genuinely affordable homes since records began. Last year we had more completions, 41,000, than records began. So record broken for council homes, record broken for genuinely affordable homes started. Good news, good news. Record broken for completions, good news. Bad news is construction inflation and the prevailing headwinds caused by a number of factors that have been well documented, which will mean that the 116,000 target will be very difficult to meet. We're still determined, though, the figure I mentioned in answer to a question from Sir Moema, is the gap between the money we receive and the money we need is £4.4 billion a year. With that support, we could get back to the sort of housing we need, which is the 1970s levels of housing that we need in our city.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Mr. Mayor, because back in 2016, when you were allocated this amount of money, you referred to it as unprecedented. Apparently it was precedented. Why do you think Londoners have to put up, especially young Londoners who are feeling the housing crisis more than anyone, I think, why should they have to put up with a mayor who's just not delivering on what he promised Londoners?
Well, that's not the evidence in relation to the policies we've delivered on in Term 1 and Term 2. So look at the things that Londoners, young Londoners care about. They care about making sure that the air they breathe is clean, delivering on that. They care about making sure we're helping the private sector grow more jobs, we're delivering on that. They're trying to make sure that we get back our city on back on its feet after the pandemic. We're delivering on that with the tourism campaign. They want us to make sure we have more genuine affordable homes. We're delivering on that. Record numbers of homes begun. We're lobbying the government on those things outside of our control. Freezing private rents for the next 2 years saves £3,000. Giving us the control over rents by way of rent control would help those young Londoners as well. And we know young Londoners are on our side because in response to us asking them on priorities, the things that they care about are the things we're delivering on.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is by Assemblymember Bailey.
Morning again, Mr. Mayor. In your manifesto, you pledged to bring crime down, and we know that the pandemic reduced a lot of crime rates, but lately they've been climbing up. So violence is up 5.4%, robbery is up 18%, rape is up 8.5%, theft from the person's up 59.9%. What else could you be doing to reduce crime to actually fulfil this manifesto pledge?
Well, it's really important that we recognise, because of the hard work of the police and others in our society, our policies have been tough on crime and tough on the complex causes. We have made progress in relation to reducing knife crime with injury, reducing knife crime with those injured below the age of 25, reducing crime in relation to burglary, reducing crime in relation to moped-enabled crime, and other areas of where we've managed to reduce crime. There are other areas we've not managed to make the progress that we'd like to make. It's no consolation if you're a victim of crime to know that we've bucked the national trend. The increases in these areas are far higher outside London than they are in London. Our population has grown by more than 1 million since 2010. Police numbers went down at one stage south of 30,000. We've now managed to, by City Hall funding, get those numbers up to record level so we can be tough on crime. In the absence of government support, we're investing in young Londoners, being tough on the complex causes, and so we hope to make more progress. We've now got a reforming commissioner who believes in higher standards, more trust and less crime, and so I'm hoping for more progress going forward. But I'm afraid it's no consolation if you're the victim of crime to know that there's progress made, because you yourself are 100% the victim of crime.
Do you think that it's some failings from City Hall, so the Violence Reduction Unit, for instance, which has had a significant sum of money, some £94 million, and many people around this horseshoe have had concerns with how that money is tracked, what it's spent on? Do you think there's more you could be doing with that money, particularly around sanction detections, for instance, because they are very, very low historically and don't seem to be improving at all?
Sorry, Chair. Does the member say that the VRU should be doing more detection?
No. I said the VRU, you should be looking at where that money's going, tracking the effectiveness of that money. I then wondered, is there anything particularly around sanction detection they could be doing? That's why I ask you, because of course much of your answer, although correct, didn't really answer the question, what could you do? That's why I talk about the VRU, because you have control of it. What could you do more of to help crime go down in London? Because currently you're failing on that manifesto pledge to deliver a safer London.
So what's the link between the VRU and sanctions detection?
I'm hoping that you can find one. Is there any kind of training they could do? Could it be helping communities, help the police better? The VRU money is often used for the community, to talk to communities. A big part of helping the police catch criminals is good information. Are you doing anything around community relations with the VRU? Could you do more of it, for instance?
Well, I'm hoping that the member isn't speaking to the government about the VRU, because the government actually likes the VRU in London and is using it as a template for some of the other VRUs around the country. The VRU in London was the first VRU in England and Wales and has made fantastic progress. In fact, I met this week some of our young people's advisory group doing great work in relation to being tough on the complex causes of crime, giving young people constructive things to do, mentors, after-school clubs, working with youth groups at weekends and during the summer holidays, really good schemes in relation to supporting those who are doing work with those who are vulnerable to being groomed by charismatic gang leaders and others, dealing with the issue of county lines, getting the young people involved in training police officers. One of the things that this Commissioner is passionate about is high standards, and we can use young people to help the police with their standards. If the member has got any ideas about sanction detection and VA, you're more than happy to look at that. We'd hope that that's the job of the police. Of course, everyone's the eyes and the ears of the police, but I'm more than happy to hear any ideas the member may have on this interesting idea he's got.
Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Assembly Member Prince.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hi. Hi, you too.
On page 47 of your manifesto, you said...
Microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, that's me. Sorry, Mike.
That's my fault, actually. I'll accept the blame. On page 47 of your manifesto, you said that women and girls do not feel safe in our city. This is simply unacceptable. And over a year and a half on, how would you say, or would you say, that women feel safer now?
Chair, I've got to begin the answer by saying I think the most difficult half an hour and the most difficult half day of my life was yesterday. It was tough, and Keith knows the tragedy in his community with Zara Alina and the awful, brutal abduction, rape, sexual assault, I beg your pardon, and murder of Zara Alina. It is the case that women and girls are more scared now than in the past across the country. It is the case that every 3 days a woman will be killed by a man in our country. It is the case that after Bieber and Nicole, after Sabina, after Sarah, after Zara, women and girls are asking the question, why do we still face this fear that simply going out, going to work, going to school, using the tube, using the bus, going home, that there is a danger because of their gender. And I've reflected on what more we can do. I'll never forget speaking to Zara's nan yesterday. And so, yeah, sure, there's more we can do, there's more we've got to do. And I don't accept this as acceptable in our city in 2022.
You correctly identified as well that, and I was going to mention Zara Alina, and our thoughts are with her family. It's men that need to change. You did say that, and then you went on to say, and that's why we're rooting out these abhorrent behaviours. It's so important. And as a result of that, and the credit to you where it's due, you launched your Have a Word campaign. Have you done any research on how successful that campaign has been at all, Mr.
Yeah, it's been. So we've done some research about who's watched it, how has it changed behaviour. 85% of men who've watched it have changed their behaviour and challenged a friend or a colleague. I mean, it's won awards, but that doesn't really matter. The key thing is it's changing behaviour. And what we've also done, Keith, is we've put it in schools now. We're starting in secondary schools, and we're funding a group to go in and support teachers who work incredibly hard to take them through that. And we're going, and boys' schools as well as mixed schools as well. And it's been a really useful tool to get the conversation going, because most blokes don't realise that what they call banter is not received that way by the recipient. And so, I'm not suggesting at all that all men are acting inappropriately or all men are lecherous or whatever, but all of us should reflect on our behaviour, and we've got to start early. And we are doing that. And so I'm happy to send you a note, but the results are fantastic in terms of, I'm not saying by itself as a silver bullet, but it's fantastic in relation to the progress we've made.
Okay, and finally, I don't necessarily want you to answer this now, but you also said there was a need for much better data. Could you write to me with that data around experiences of women and girls and what other data has been collated?
Sure, other stuff, yeah, happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Assembly Member Duval.
Wow, what a tour de force we've just had there, from 7 critiques or 7 contributions are critiquing your manifesto. Mr Mayor, I don't understand how people can talk about the extension of ULEZ and not talk about the issues of the health concerns of pollution within our society and within London's air quality. Do you agree?
Well, that's my point. See, I think those Tories in this chamber must take us and Londoners for fools, because there's sudden concern for charities. No concern over the last 12 years when austerity has meant, record business for these charities. Suddenly concerned because the ULEZ, and you can see the Trojan horse here, is a policy they oppose. And where are the concerns for premature deaths, children with stunted lungs, adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma, cancer, dementia, heart disease? And we saw, by the way, during the meeting to discuss the MTS being revised, their concern was really vested interest, using groups, many outside London, who are paid for by vested interest, to oppose what experts say is a world-leading policy to clean up our polluting air.
And, in terms of transparency, I've not heard you talk about any of the interventions or the inspectorates. In fact, you've given full support to the inspectorates of when they feel they need to intervene, and you've given your full backing and commitment to come out of those special measures. Equally, on the recommendations of Renwell, which I saw a member of this Assembly rubbishing the contribution of the fire service towards the Grenfell recommendations, claiming that we were somehow slow and tardy. It was disrespectful to our fire officers, to be honest, because of the remaining recommendations that are not completed. I think they require some government intervention. Is that not correct?
Well, I'd go further with respect, Senator Deval. You're being too generous to the Tories. When the Deputy Mayor and myself have been trying to bring to the attention concerns around lack of trust, lack of accountability, and lack of transparency in the police service, some call it's been anti-police. You remember, right? Because we were trying to explain this is linked with policing by consent. When Dr. Debbie Weeks-Bernard and Sophie Linden spent the whole of summer during the pandemic consulting black Londoners after George Floyd's brutal murder criticised by some, and when we started doing the reform required in the fire service, the same criticism for not being unqualified supporters of the fire service. It's because we're pro-police and pro-fire service we want to reform them. It's because we're pro-Londoners we want to have public servants who can make sure that the culture and systems are conducive to good service. And again, a good example of why Londoners, 1.2 million in 2021, 1.3 million in 2016, voted for this mayor rather than the candidate they put forward.
And, Mr Mayor, look, me and you may take a different view on Sir Tom Windsor, but one thing we probably could agree, wasn't he wise not to follow the recommendation proposed by some Home Secretary, we're not sure which one, when they said, what we want to do is we want you to be chucked out of office, and can he make a recommendation for that? Well, and he decided not to include it.
Well, no, hold on a sec.
He decided not to include it.
Don't fall for the oldest one in the book, which is there was no reason for Sir Tom to mention that recommendation. There were other recommendations that were made to him that aren't in his report that he didn't mention. What you're seeing is his bias seeping into everything he does. And what the chair of the PCC and other members of the PCC are in danger of doing, I'm not saying they are, is they're in danger of being people that will be seen as being staunch defenders, unqualified, not just of Cressida Dick, but of Sir Tom Windsor, unqualified, even though the current Home Secretary, the current Home Office, want nothing to do with this report.
And don't you feel, in terms of the issues of around the crime, which I got slightly confused, I could see the look on your face when you were trying to answer the Assembly member's question between VRU and sanction detection rates and all the rest of it. What do you need to do to get across to Assembly members to understand some of the issues that are going on within the service? So sanction detection rates and some of the issues are to do with the justice system and some of the problems relating to it. The VRU, much that I thought we were going to get a good question from the Assembly member, because he started off well about some of the expenditure and the way that we should be looking at it and holding people to account for it, but then got confused about its direct role around that. How do we explain about the VRU and its long-term approach to crime prevention and to doing that work? How do we get it across to opinion formers, to the public, and more importantly, to the politicians who should know better?
Well, there's 2 points in response to that. So the first response is the Violence Reduction Unit is part of the public health approach to fighting crime, and it's to do with the complex causes of crime. But the second point is, I think that exchange between Sean Bailey and myself is proof, if it was ever needed, that we should abolish the House of Lords.
He's not there yet, Chair.
Thank you. I think Assembly Member Bailey, did you want to say something?
Just let's be clear.
Is this a point of order?
Yeah, yes. I was named. The question I asked, to the.
It was Assembly Member Landevelle who mentioned you.
No, it was the mayor.
Pardon?
Point of explanation. It was the mayor. It was the mayor.
Okay.
Yeah. The point I was trying to make, Mayor, you often talk about the community being the eyes and ears of the police, and I was suggesting that the VRU has enough money to try and do something in the community to get the community to help the police. If other members are confused about what I was saying, I hope they no longer are confused.
Okay. Are we done then? Did you want to say anything, Mr. Mayor? Okay, thank you. Thanks. Next is the question in the name of Assembly Member Desai on policing regulations.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. I asked the former Commissioner to set up an independent review led by Dame Louise Casey following a series of shocking scandals involving police officers. I was concerned that a serious cultural problem existed within the Met Police Service that was allowing racism, sexism and homophobia to be downplayed and left unchallenged. The interim findings of the review unfortunately confirmed that these concerns were well-founded. The majority of those serving in the Met Police Service are appalled by these latest findings, and decent officers who want to speak out, who have clearly been let down for far too long, must be properly supported. We need strong and effective leadership, which we now have. But it's clear that the MPS misconduct system is simply not fit for purpose. There must be consistency in what constitutes gross misconduct, all allegations must be acted upon, cases must be resolved much faster, and disproportionality in the way allegations are dealt with must be eliminated. The new Commissioner accepts that the MPS is being undermined by corrupting behaviours that have gone unchallenged and have been allowed to multiply. I welcome Sir Mark's determination to proactively root out police officers who are undermining the MPS through their actions. I am pleased to see the launch of the new Anti-Corruption and Abuse Command, which will help the MPS get rid of racist, misogynistic and homophobic officers. The quicker these people can be removed from the MPS, the better. It's also clear that the solution need to extend beyond the MPS. The Commissioner has spoken about how existing police regulations limit the removal of officers who don't uphold the right values. I've called on the Home Secretary to lead a thorough review that seizes the opportunity for fundamental reform, and I welcome the government's commitment to this review.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, you talked about eliminating disproportionality. How are you working with MOPAC to ensure that the MPS treats its ethnic minority staff fairly and impartially?
Well, the good news is it was our data, MOPAC's data, that allowed Dame Louise Casey to reach the conclusions she did. So we're now doing an updated piece of evidence and insight work into misconduct, which we hope to publish early next year. It's the data that's really important, because that's where you can see evidence of disproportionality, and the evidence in relation to black officers, Asian minority officers, was stark. And Dame Louise Casey said there were clearly systemic issues that require addressing.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, the Commissioner's comments that 3,000 police officers are unable to be fully deployed, which is just under 10% of all police officers in London, highlights the continued pressure that policing resources face in London. How important is it that the government protects policing budgets and doesn't once again impose austerity on the police service?
What I worry about is the government is going to require Londoners to pay a regressive tax, council tax, to make up for the lack of funding from central government. And so what I'm afraid is going to happen is the Londoners will be asked to pay even more towards policing in proportionate terms than they have in the past because of central government cuts. You can't police in the cheap. You know, the members on the Conservative side complain about crime going up. It's going up across the country as a consequence of austerity. We've got to support our police, tough on crime. We've got to support communities being tough on the complex causes of crime.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, finally, can I take this opportunity to thank you for your statement outside the Old Bailey yesterday, where you paid tribute to the family of Zara Lida and also said that women deserve and have the right to be safe, and that you would not rest until the streets of London are safe for women to walk. And the extent to which the police service has to change is illustrated by yet another depressing report in today's press, which criticizes some police interaction, which criticizes how police interact with rape survivors, when pointing out, even pointing out widespread victim blaming. There is clearly still much work to be done here. Mr. Mayor, I also take this opportunity to wish you, your family and staff a peaceful Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. And just to say, this is another good example, Operation Soteria. It began in London. Yeah. Claire Waxman's work, which has been rolled out across the country, it's about transparency. The police service opened up our books to let people come in, and we will learn from that. Victims will benefit, as will the rest of the country.
Thank you. Simply to say, I would be unfair if I didn't say to you, I didn't hear a question there, by the way. I heard a statement, but not a question.
I'll ask him to comment on it. So.
It would have been good if you said, could you, Mr. Mayor, comment on this? Yeah.
Well, I think you took it for granted.
Right. The next question is the name of Assembly Member Prince on the impact of expanding the ULEZ on East London meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Air pollution is a matter of life and death, leading to 4,000 Londoners a year dying prematurely. All of the boroughs with the highest numbers of premature deaths attributable to air pollution are located in outer London, including Havering with 178 deaths a year and Redbridge 142 deaths in 1 year in East London. This is a serious matter. The London-wide expansion of ULEZ will directly address this toxic air crisis and will allow 5 million more Londoners to breathe clean air. Following expansion, 145 more schools, mostly in outer London, are expected to fall within the WHO guidelines for NO2 of 20 micrograms per cubic metre, improving the quality and length of life for thousands of London school children. Already, around 85% of vehicles currently seen driving in outer London meet the standards, meaning most drivers won't be affected by the charge. We're encouraging everyone to check if their vehicle is ULEZ compliant using TfL's online vehicle checker. I'm aware, though, that this is a big step for outer London, and it's important that a thorough consultation was run to hear people's views. The consultation ran for 2 months and received nearly 58,000 responses. TfL worked hard to reach as many Londoners as possible, emailing over 2 million Londoners and almost 2,000 stakeholders directly. Adverts were placed in national, regional and specialist press and on local radio stations across London and the surrounding area. It would be a surprise if any elected politician in London didn't know about the consultation while it was open. TfL received 342 consultation responses from stakeholders, including many from elected politicians. Every one was considered as part of the consultation process. The responses TfL received have directly shaped the plan we're now moving ahead with. This includes a £110 million scrappage scheme to support Londoners on lower incomes, disabled Londoners, micro-businesses, sole traders and charities to scrap or retrofit their non-compliant vehicles and new and extended exemption periods for London's disabled drivers and community transport organisations. We're also planning to improve public transport in outer London, adding over 1 million new kilometres to the bus network in outer London. I understand that the meeting the member is proposing has not even been discussed with at least some of the proposed attendees. If the member would like to have a serious discussion about this or any other matter, he can contact me and I'll be happy to respond.
I'll take that as a no then, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Chair, the member in his question named politicians without doing the courtesy to ask them whether they want to have this meeting he's proposing or they're happy with their name being mentioned in the question. If he's serious about working on a cross-party basis. He knows where to reach me. We've done it before. And he should have the courtesy to speak to some of these politicians who didn't even know they'd been named in this question.
Mr. Mayor, for clarity, I was informed that that every person that I've named wanted to have the meeting. So if I've been misinformed, I apologise. But I was led to believe that they all would want to attend that meeting, Mr. Mayor.
No, Chair. At least two of them, didn't know about the name being mentioned. Everyone knew about the consultation. Most people responded. I'm always more than happy to meet politicians of whatever party, parliamentarians or other politicians, council leaders, and I'm more than happy to meet with anybody. What I think is not sensible is some sort of political stunt.
No. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to call upon Assembly Member Dr. Sahota, and this is on the clock.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. To strengthen alternatives to private car use and maximise the potential benefits of expanding the ULEZ, I've announced a plan for improving the bus network in Outer London. To give some examples, 2 new routes will be introduced in Sutton, with improved services to the new cancer hub at the Royal Marsden Hospital. In East London, new zero-emission cross-river services will be introduced subject to consultation. This includes a new high-frequency limited stop service between Grove Park and Canary Wharf, and an extension to Route 129 north across the river to Great Eastern Quay via the Royal Docks. We're also planning new services and improvements which will see over 1 million further kilometres added to the bus network to support growth areas in a number of other Outer London locations. This is part of the biggest expansion ever in Outer London of the bus network. Examples include improved links between Harold Hill and Upminster in Havering, new and improved services at Brent Cross in Barnet, improved services in Southall, bus improvements in Harrow and Willesden area, new routes to serve the Haringey Heartlands development at Wood Green, and better bus links in Wanstead, including to and from Whipps Cross Hospital. These improvements come in addition to a range of significant enhancements that have already been delivered this year, totalling over 500,000 kilometres per annum. As well as improvements to the bus network, TfL's also progressed other major public transport schemes in Outer London, Barking Riverside Extension and Elizabeth Line being just 2 examples. At a time, Chair, of severe financial constraint for TfL, we've worked hard to improve public transport in Outer London and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that, and particularly for improving the bus services in my constituency in Southall. Are you planning any further routes and capacity changes, and how can we feed into the making suggestions to you about extra capacity in our local areas?
Thank you for your question. So we recognise that public transport in many parts of Outer London aren't as good as they should be. So as part of the expansion of the £1.1 million, 1.1 million kilometres of additional bus routes in Outer London, I will be speaking to members of the Assembly, councils, MPs about where there is the greatest demand, and there's a number of criteria about new bus routes or extensions, and we'll be announcing in January or early February how Londoners and colleagues in the Chamber can get involved.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Assembly Member Best. Sorry, I forgot I was in the chair for a second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I didn't see that you've announced anything that would benefit residents in Chingford at the moment in terms of bus routes, which will be essential for them. I have asked you previously about whether you would look into opening the additional exit at Chingford Station, and you've said you'd look into that. Could you promise in the new year to write to me on that, please?
Yeah. Chair, apologies if the member's not clear. She hasn't already got a response. Can I chase that up? And I'm sure that there are colleagues taking note of that omission on my part, and I'll follow that up.
Yes, I take the chair back.
Sorry about that. Will you, Mr. Mayor, take into account the recent recommendation by Hillingdon Council to put in an express bus route that will connect Uxbridge to the new Crossrail stations? And could you write to me with what you will be doing with regard to that recommendation?
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank the Deputy Chair for the question. Yeah, let me take it away. I mean, actually, that's just on the face of it. One of the things that we'll be looking for when it comes to the announcement in January. But I'm more than happy to write to Senator Boff to give him an answer to his direct question.
Great. Thank you. The next is a question in the name of Assembly Member Hall on the confidence in MOPAC.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at the heart of MOPAC's work is my police and crime plan, which has 4 priority areas: reducing violence in all its forms, including violence against women and girls, increasing trust and confidence, improving the service provided to victims of crime and protecting Londoners from criminal exploitation and harm. Since I became Mayor, MOPAC also hosts my Violence Reduction Unit, a team of specialists who bring people across London together to better understand why violence happens and to take action to prevent it now and in the long term. The largest proportion of the MOPAC budget goes into commissioning programmes and services for Londoners. This year alone, £62.5 million is being spent on victim services. Since I became Mayor, I've also overseen an investment of over £100 million in work to address violence against women and girls. During the pandemic, MOPAC invested £1.5 million to provide emergency accommodation to those at risk of domestic abuse. MOPAC has funded the Rescue and Response Project since 2018, which has helped hundreds of young Londoners to not only cut ties with exploitative county lines gangs, but also provide them with ongoing support to help them into training and education and towards employment. MOPAC has continued to strengthen transparency of policing through the largest rollout of body-worn videos in the country, alongside a full review of the London Gangs Matrix. The new Commissioner has committed to a full-scale overhaul of the Matrix as a result of this work. MOPAC invests over £13 million annually to tackle crime and its complex causes through grassroots funding through the London Crime Prevention Fund. MOPAC's update of the London Rape Review has led to changes in culture and practices from the CPS, the MPS and wider criminal justice partners. It was MOPAC that designed Operation Soteria, which has now been rolled out nationally. MOPAC does all this at relatively small cost, with a core budget of 0.2% as a share of the MPS core budget, compared to an equivalent figure of 0.3% for the West Midlands and 1% for Greater Manchester. With the MPS now in the engaged process, MOPAC's oversight is more important than ever. To support and oversee the changes needed, Deputy Mayor Sophie Linden and MOPAC Chief Executive Diana Lutchford attend the monthly MPS Turnaround Board, and I attend the HMI Police Performance Oversight Group with the Commissioner and Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I would have thought a MOPAC's job was far more important to make sure that it didn't go into special measures. Mr Mayor, at the Police and Crime Committee on the 16th of November, Sir Thomas Windsor said on the Met going into special measures that is not only because the MPS was failing, it is also because MOPAC was failing. So given that, is it not the time to reassess the leadership of MOPAC?
Point, Chair, there are 6 police forces in special measures. Only one of them engages with MOPAC. The majority are Conservative Police and Crime Commissioners. In 2019, when Sir Thomas Windsor was the Chief Inspector and inspected the Met Police Service, many of the things that were picked up when Andy Cook took over weren't picked up when Cressida Dick was the Commissioner and Sir Tom Windsor was the Chief Inspector in 2019. Notwithstanding HMI not picking these things up, MOPAC did alert concerns in relation to concerns around victims, concerns around trust and confidence, concerns around child protection, all of which were subsequently picked up by the recent HMI report. I'll give you one example, Chair. Crime recording in 2019, when Sir Tom was Chief Inspector, was rated as good. However, with Andy Cook as the Chief Inspector, it's been rated as inadequate. We support the HMI marking the police's homework, and MOPAC's working with this HMI to make sure we get the police out of special measures and give the Londoners the police service we deserve.
So you seem to have something against Sir Tom Windsor because you talk about him badly every time you open your mouth to talk about him. Why is that? Is that because he wrote such a damning report of your behaviour at that time? Is that why you've got this thing against Sir Tom Windsor?
I'm quite clear, Chair, that the report from Sir Tom Windsor was biased and flawed. I've not hid my views in relation to his report. There's a bigger issue here, which is police in our city. And rather than cheap party political points against me using Sir Tom Windsor's report, I thought this question was about how we improve policing of our city. We now have a reforming commissioner. We now have HMI working with MOPAC and the Met Police Service and myself to bring about that change. And as the new commissioner says, what we all want is high standards, more trust and less crime.
Mr Mayor, the cheap comments, actually, when we're referred to as those Tories over there, somebody else from that side are referring too generous to the Tories. The way we are treated at times is absolutely appalling, so I don't see how you can complain at all. As for bias on behalf of Sir Tom, you are absolutely incorrect, and I would suggest anybody watches those 6 hours of meeting when he disproved all the comments that you made against him. I am aware that my time's running out. I'll leave you to the Labour questions, which are all, dear Mr Mayor, tell me how wonderful you are, Mr Mayor, because you never mind those questions, but you particularly hate the ones for us. But I'm out of time, so I will say, have a nice... I'm just about to be nice. Would you not like to listen to me being nice?
No, I don't.
It's quite unique, you know.
You are out of time. You are out of time. There was no question there, a statement.
There is
Hang on, you are out of time.
I'm
you
about
are out of time.
to say I wish the Mayor a very happy Christmas with his family, and I genuinely mean that. And I look forward. And I look forward.
Assemblymember Hall. That's the end of it.
I look forward.
Assemblymember Hall. You are out of.
I look forward to next year, Mr. Mayor. Really.
You are out of time, and you're out of place. Honestly, going beyond this time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
When I'm wishing the Mayor a happy Christmas.
And I wish you a Merry Christmas too. But I want the time to come to an end now.
Well, I do like the face-to-face interaction with the GP because, by gosh, anywhere else we'd be having a telephone conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Well,
Chair, could I
Assembly Member, sorry, Chair, I want to give a point of explanation, may I?
Yes.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall, I have been a GP since 1984, worked in the NHS. I have stood working in the COVID wards, in the COVID patients, not having illegal parties in my surgery. I have not been breaking the law. I have been serving the people, and I will be standing with the nurses today, fighting for a fair settlement, and I'm disgusted that the Secretary of State of Health, right, Steve Barclays, has refused to meet them. And I'm proud of my record as a GP, proud of the record of my family serving the NHS, and proud of the record of the services I've given to my patients. So thank you very much.
Deputy Chair, could I have a point of... Could I apologise to those who've come from Parliament when I promised them better quality debate here?
Okay.
We get better answers in Parliament as well, to be fair.
I know their spirits are high. It must be the festive season coming shortly. But can we get through this question time, please? The next question is the name of Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you, Chair. The past 2 years have been the most challenging in TfL's history, and the impact of the pandemic on TfL's finances has been devastating. Following tough negotiations, TfL has now some funding certainty to 2024. This will allow it to get on with the job of achieving operational financial sustainability by 23-24, rebuilding its finances and delivering vital improvements to make our city more accessible, greener and healthier. An average of £150 million per year will be invested in safe and active travel. This includes funding for London Borough's expanding London Cycle network, increasing the number of safer junctions, more 20 miles per hour zones, delivering new cycle hangars, more cycle training and progressing the next stage of the direct vision standard. TfL will deliver the expansion of the ULEZ London-wide to improve air quality for 5 million Londoners, which will be complemented by new bus service improvements in outer London. The plan will support my ambition for a zero-carbon city by 2030, including keeping us on a path towards London's bus fleet being zero emission by 2030. Over the business plan period, we'll see the delivery of new trains on the Piccadilly line and the DLR, new trams, and the completion of the 4 lines modernisation programme, which will improve journeys for millions of Londoners and visitors. The plan does face challenges, not least the inflationary pressures we're all seeing, and the need for TfL to deliver further significant savings as part of the government funding conditions. But after several years of extreme uncertainty, TfL can now move forward positively, albeit in a more constrained financial context than prior to the pandemic.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And just to get this up front so we don't run out of time, Happy Christmas and Happy Christmas to everyone else. So my first question is, Mr Mayor, why are you so fantastic? No, sorry, that's what the Conservative group hear every time we speak.
Chair,
crack on.
Chair, point of order. Chair.
Yes.
I demand those questions start in that way.
Sorry, Chair, Mr Mayor. Given that the financial settlement for Transport for London is not what you wanted or what we all wanted, I think, how will you protect those who can least afford to be impacted by the loss of transport options, particularly in the middle of a cost of living crisis?
I'm Chair, this is a really important question. Look, one of the things that my experience of those who work in transport, and it's not me being pejorative or making generalisation, is they can sometimes, it is me making generalisation, they like the big shiny stuff and the big infrastructure projects, the sort of the trains and that sort of stuff. And as you've hinted, actually, for those in communities that you live in, spend lots of time in outer London, those communities who are less well off, what they want is decent buses running on time, right? They want to make sure cycling is safe, that the pavements are safe for them to walk, and so forth. And so what we're trying to do is to change the thinking around, inverted commas, transport geeks, to make sure they understand that is just as important. The shiny stuff's great. We're all proud of the Elizabeth line. You know, new stations are really important on the transport, the train part of the transport link, but actually buses are crucial to our city, particularly in outer London. And so that's why I was proud to announce 10 days ago 1.1 million kilometres of new buses in outer London. And it's really important we think about how we can serve those parts of our city that use the car because they've got nothing else, they've got no other way of getting around. And it's really important to give them alternatives.
Thanks, and that announcement was welcome. So I'm really interested in this as well, the difference between the big shiny stuff, the exciting stuff, which I also love, and the detail of how we really make sure Londoners can get around. And I've been trying to dig into the detail of how Transport for London makes those decisions. I keep running up against brick walls, to be honest, and particularly in the context of this Central London bus review, I was seeking to find out from TfL what thinking had gone in to the impact on already disadvantaged groups before deciding that bus cuts were on the table. And I've asked this several times in committee, but never got a response, unfortunately. In the end, had to write to the interim commissioner, and effectively, well, the response that I got only a couple of weeks ago was that it was not common practice to consider the effects of proposals when they're still at a high-level stage. This seems to me a big mistake, because if you're only doing the equality impact once you've made the decision, then you're missing out. So in creating the business plan, do you think that balance has been made and the equality impacts have been considered?
Well, firstly, your criticism is valid. We've tried to learn from that. So a couple of things. Firstly, so this business plan, we didn't consult once it was written. During the course of the drafting, there was consultation done with the group. You're spot on. It's at the design phase where you've got to bring in these sorts of views, right? Because with the best of intentions, there are unintended consequences unless you're involved at the design phase. So this business plan, and at the TfL board meeting, we set out, the officers set out the work done, and I'll ask somebody to write you a note about the consultation done, not just with the board, but with the communities, the groups and so forth, and the assessments done during the course of it. And that's why I suspect it's been well received. It's a shorter business plan. It's not 5 years. It's only until 26. But we've done that. And also around the TfL board now, since I've been mayor, we have representatives from councils who they know their communities best, right? They were never on the TfL board. We have disability expertise on the board now. We've got trade unions on the board now. So that is, if you like, the safety valve. But you're spotted at the design phase with the officers. You've got to be consulting, right? And we're doing that. With the bus cuts, it was difficult because the government said you've got to cut 4%. You've got to do it quickly. And I think you'd again be fair to, if your criticism is you didn't consult widely enough before you went out. I wouldn't say that's unfair.
Thanks. That is, again, really welcome, and I look forward to hearing that detail. And I'm really over my time, but can I just really briefly ask whether the decision about whether to reinstate travel before 9 a.m. for 60-plus Oyster card holders, will you be able to take into account that impact on them prior to making a decision? Because again, I'm getting from TfL, I'm getting sure. we'll do the assessment after we've made the decision.
No,
so.
no, I don't want to give false hope here. No. Because the choice is getting rid of it altogether, and that's what the government wants us to do. So I hear calls of here. It was the austerity budget in 2010 that led us here. So let's not hear here from the Lib Dems in relation to the consequences of austerity. So what the government said to us was you've got to remove free travel for kids, and free travel for over 60s. We managed to keep it for over 60s, but we've had to not have it before 9 a.m, between 4:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. The choice, I suspect, may not be returning it to 4:30 a.m. and 9 a.m, is removing it altogether. That's what the government wants us to do. And it all began in 2010.
Yeah, no, I do accept that. OK, thanks, Mr Mayor. Back to you, Chair.
The next question is the name of Assemblymember Bukhari. It's on the tackling all forms of air pollution.
Thank you, Chair. This month marks the 70th anniversary of London's Great Smog, and just last week the Chief Medical Officer released his annual report, which highlighted the very real impact air pollution has throughout our lives right now. These serve a very important reminder to us that we must take bold action now, not later, to protect our health. In addition to introducing and expanding the ULEZ to all of London, I'm doing everything I can to reduce transport emissions. I'm cleaning up London's buses with a reduction of NOx emissions of up to 90% and the largest zero-emission fleet in Western Europe, both achieved since I became mayor. I'm supporting the delivery of electric vehicle charging infrastructure with over 11,200 charging points. London now has over a third of the UK's total and more rapid charging points than any other city in Europe. I've delivered a five-fold increase in the number of protected cycle lanes to help more people to choose a greener, sustainable, active alternative to motor vehicles. I'm also taking bold action tackling non-transport emissions. Through my planning powers, I've created a unique low-emission zone for construction machinery. Innovative policies like Air Quality Positive have made enhancing air quality central to urban planning. I've trialled indoor filtration systems in nurseries and made sure that London's boroughs have the training and advice they need to implement the new solid fuel regulations to reduce pollution from wood and coal. Just as air quality is a shared responsibility, the solutions must also be shared. That's why I'm working with public health experts to ensure that the most vulnerable are informed and protected, including through City Hall market campaigns and air quality alerts, marketing campaigns and air quality alerts. I'm promoting borough action through my London Local Air Quality Management Framework, providing access to hyper-local data through Breathe London, and supporting businesses and communities through my Air Quality Fund. I'm also supporting coordinated action on wood burning with boroughs and funding communication campaigns with local groups. And more than a dozen years of delays in work to meet current legal limits, the government's now missed its own legal deadline to set new targets. This government is consigning yet another generation to toxic air, and it's about time they gave the power to city leaders across the UK, including London, to act.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As you mentioned, 17% of London's particular matter pollution is actually attributed to wood burning. And last year, my motion on wood burning stoves passed. You agreed to raise awareness. According to answers to my written questions, you said a communication campaign was to start this winter. And it's winter, it's Christmas time, wood burning is increasing. I've seen no explicit social media or press releases. What's the delay?
So we were successful in securing the grant from DEFRA of £300,000, and we've already begun the research that the part of the grant was about to quantify the emissions from different types of burning activity and then raise awareness of the impact of wood burning. And as I said in answer, so the research has commenced across 15 boroughs. The campaign messages and assets will be informed by the research element of the project. The public behaviour change and awareness campaign is expected to run from the end of October next year until the end of January 2024. And the metrics for the campaign, which are part of the DEFRA bid, are the research, of course, the survey of 10,000 residents in boroughs before the COM scheme and after the communication scheme, the number of communication assets produced, the number of communications methods used and interaction with messaging, the number of new approaches deployed, and 1 million residents reached in participation boroughs. And I'm more than happy to write to the member to give an update.
I'd like to see that in writing. Thank you. This February, as you know, is the anniversary of 10th anniversary of Ella's passing, and it was only right that we had a cross-party support in the Assembly for Ella's law. And I'm pleased that the related Commons early day motion co-sponsored by Lib Dem Vera Hobhouse is gaining support. Now, the Clear Air Bills highlights a danger for indoor pollutants. Emissions are going up. Complaints up to about 19,000 to local authorities. Only 19 penalties though were issued. Will you be writing to solid fuel suppliers, London MPs, local authorities to support Ella's law and to remind them about the regulations on permitted fuels?
Well, not for the first time, Chair. There's a rewriting of history. Can I give credit to Baroness Jenny Jones for the last time I checked she was Green, not Lib Dem, for the amazing... It's like a Lib Dem leaflet, isn't it,
It's cross-party, isn't it? And I'm sure you said in your book, didn't you, that you wanted to build coalitions across the political spectrum. So let's not do that now. That's actually not the way that you want to do air pollution across London. We work across party.
If I close my eyes, Chair, it was all like somebody's reading a Lib Dem leaflet.
Okay, we're not going to do that either. You again are not answering the question.
Full of overclaiming and misleading. But Jenny Jones deserves huge credit, and I'm really pleased that Sue Hayman supported Jenny Jones. But Jenny Jones,
and we've got cross-party agreement on that, as I've just said. And you said in your book recently that you're going to be releasing a book saying about air pollution, overcoming voter cynicism and building coalitions across the political spectrum. So let's go on that basis. Will you commit the same urgency to wood burning by maybe committing some money or focus on getting an air pollution task force specifically on wood burning, bringing together campaign groups, local authorities, and aiming to phase out harmful wood burning in London? Because the Climate Change Committee has actually advised the government that wood-burning stoves should be phased out over time. And actually, an expert group has recommended the government to eliminate home installation of new wood-burning stoves by 2030. Now, 2030 is your own target. Is that something that you can now commit to when it comes to wood-burning?
Assemblyman Bukhari, you asked such a long question. You manage your time very badly. Assemblyman Bukhari. We will never know the answers now. So can we move on to the next question, please, now?
That's not really poor, though, isn't it? It's a poor show.
Hang on. Look, I don't make value judgments. Assembly Member Bukhari, you are out of time. The next question is the name of Assembly Member Barry on the absence of van and lorry traffic reduction targets.
Thank you, Chair. TfL has successfully been working in partnership with the freight industry and businesses to encourage a transition to cleaner, safer and more efficient vehicles. As well as the existing expansion of the ULEZ and the tightened LEZ, this joint work includes our world-leading direct vision standard, which has revolutionised HGV safety by requiring advanced cab design or other safety technology to improve driver visibility of vulnerable road users. We're now working to expand the ULEZ to the whole of London next year. My 2018 transport strategy aimed to reduce freight traffic in the central London morning peak by 10% below 2016 levels by 2026. Levels are now well below this 2026 target, although this is partially as a result of the pandemic. We can't be complacent and assume this is a permanent shift. I recognise, of course, that more needs to be done in the face of the climate emergency. I've set the challenging ambition for the capital to be net zero by 2030. To support this, I commissioned Element Energy to analyse potential pathways for London to meet this target. Their analysis, published in January, informed the November 2022 revision to my transport strategy. Element Energy's accelerated green scenario, which is my preferred pathway to deliver my net zero target, includes a headline forecast that a 27% reduction in car vehicle kilometres travelled in London is required by 2030 compared to 2018 levels. The scenario also includes forecasts for both LGV and HGV kilometre changes by 2030. To be clear, the MTS wording was changed to directly reflect the accelerated green scenario in the report, not to ignore or water down our ambitions for a switch to cleaner, safer and more efficient freight vehicles. I'll continue to work closely with the freight industry as outlined in my Freight and Service in Action Plan to support a shift from road freight to water, rail and zero-emission last-mile solutions. A 27% reduction in car vehicle kilometres would be transformational for our city and represents the scale of ambition that will be required in the road transport sector to realise a London net zero 2030 target.
Okay, first of all, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I tabled this question today because we had a bit of a conversation about this at the plenary meeting, which was very interesting, but it didn't get you out of my bad books on this question of vehicle kilometres for HGVs and LGVs. Now, I asked you a written question at the same time on that day, and I got the answer back, which was asking what's in that Element Energy set of assumptions, what is going on with the different types of vehicle and the reductions by borough. And the numbers I got back were really shocking. So by 2030, Element Energy's report assumes and calculates there will be no reduction in HGV kilometres and a 0.9% reduction in van kilometres across the capital. In boroughs, which is broken down by, vans are up in 15 boroughs and HGVs are up in 11 boroughs. Now what's going on there? That's not what we expect in terms of the distance being travelled by these vehicles. We expect if you're encouraging freight to switch, that might go down. And I think I've got it. I think the scope of what you got Element Energy to do only really talked about looking at policies you were already doing, and it relies on what targets you've set. So that's quite a circular argument. So I think I've got to the bottom of this. This is surely something you'd consider further discussion about fixing, isn't it? This seems like a gap now.
Well, firstly, Chair, it's an opportunity for me to suggest a good book, Breathe by Sadiq Khan, out to a good bookshop near you very soon. But on the serious point, it's not quite right, though, is it? Because we have got a target to reduce freight by 10%.
In the central zone, but like the borough by borough analysis shows, although it's going down in some boroughs, it's going up by the same amount in the others. You're just shifting it. You're not actually reducing it.
Well, no, because the target in the MTS originally was 10% in central London. But what the accelerated green response from Element Energy talks about is making sure we can keep to that across London. So
no, it doesn't. No, because these are the numbers from that.
Sure. But this is the point that Seb was making, and I'm more than happy for you to meet with Seb Dance to discuss to reassure you. What we'd like to see by 2030 is at least a 10% reduction in freight from 2016 to 2030, on top of the 27% in car. We've made some progress. Actually, there's been a reduction of 19%. The problem with the 19% figure is that could be because of the pandemic.
And there's nothing to stop it except expanding again. No,
exactly right. So I'm more than happy, not just for belts and braces, but to get back into your good books, for you to meet with the Deputy Mayor for Transport to discuss what more we can do to reassure you. But just for me to reassure you now, we also have got policies to reduce freight. I'll give you some examples of the work we're doing.
No, because it's the targets that I'm focused on, and particularly about kilometres. Can I add one more thing, though?
Sure.
Because we had a really interesting discussion in the Transport Committee yesterday about road user charging. No, but with experts and representatives of business. It was very, very interesting. But we were all assuming, I think, within that discussion that HGVs and LGVs would be included in road user charging. And I'm not completely convinced that you can include them if you don't have a target for the reduction in number of vehicle kilometres for those groups of vehicles. So I would really welcome a meeting to discuss this further.
Why is that?
Because you're not naming a goal of reducing them in the strategy in the same way as you needed to do for other things. Anyway, I'm running out of time. So could I request a meeting to discuss this? And I know you've offered me a meeting with SAP, but to be honest, I think you should be meeting with your Deputy Mayor about his targets on this, and I'd like to convince you first.
You're not invited to one of our meetings, but you're more than happy to meet with... I meet him all the time to discuss a number of things, not least targets.
Thank you.
The next question is the name of Assemblymember Clark on the London Fire Brigade Independent Culture Review.
Well, thank you, Chair. And can I thank the Assemblymember for the responsible way she's been dealing with this really important issue. It's really important. I welcome the fact that the London Fire Commissioner has accepted the findings of the Culture Review and has committed to implement all 23 recommendations made in the report. The severity of the issues that were highlighted showed a need for urgent action to ensure staff have the support they need. The Brigade has already introduced changes immediately following the publication of the report. There is a zero-tolerance approach to discrimination, harassment and bullying, with anyone accused being suspended pending immediate investigation and dismissed if the accusation is upheld. The Brigade has introduced a new external complaints investigation service so staff can feel safe to speak up and cases will be handled objectively and confidentially. I encourage any Brigade staff who have not yet reported any poor treatment or behaviour to speak to this independent complaints service to ensure action is taken. A review is being undertaken of all people-related processes at the Brigade to eliminate discrimination, involving independent people to make immediate improvements wherever possible. There has also been improvements to make it easier and quicker for staff to access help and support. There will be a permanent shift in the approach to leadership in the organisation. It has been made clear that leaders who do not value transparency, accountability and fairness do not have a place in the London Fire Brigade. An independent committee is being established to scrutinise progress against the review. This will create an additional level of external scrutiny to hold the brigade to account for delivering change. These immediate actions are an important first step and show a willingness on behalf of the LFB to act with urgency to address the issues highlighted by the culture review.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mr. Mayor. And just taking the opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas to you and your family. And may I also thank you for your hard work for Londoners this year and your continued banging of the drum for London, both on the national and international stage during these very difficult times. You said you were angry after reading Nazir Afzal's report, and so was I. You have said the recommendations and finding must be acted upon with urgency and conviction, and they absolutely must. And it is absolutely good news that Andy Rowe commissioned this report himself and that he has accepted all of the recommendations of the report rather than, pretending that it's not a problem. He has accepted it is a problem and he is acting, and that is all heading in the right direction. When do you expect the recommendations made in the culture review will be implemented? Well,
Andy Rowe's already begun. He is saying, I think he's in danger of being too optimistic, but he's saying in the next 6 months we'll start seeing some progress. I think it takes time to change a culture. When you, as I did, first heard about the experience of Jade and Francois Spree, what was reassuring, and it's shocking, and our thoughts and prayers must remain with Jaden's family, was the Commissioner's swift action. He wasn't going to sweep it under the carpet, not complacent, not arrogant, not defensive, the opposite. And so we've started to see some progress. We're the only organisation to fulfil nearly all of the Grenfell recommendations, 26 to 29. And so the Commissioner thinks we'll start seeing progress soon. I think the fact we've got an independent team now doing the complaint system shows he means business. He's out all the time, speaking face-to-face with watches across our city. And that should give some comfort, not just to Jaden's family, but to Londoners in relation to a transformed fire service.
I think that's right, and I think that's why transformation is so important, and having a transformative commissioner is crucial. In Gloucestershire, the fire service is also under enhanced monitoring due to culture issues, and we have seen similar issues in South Wales. I think what's become clear is that these culture issues are not exclusive to London. I hope and I fully expect that the LFB will be an example of how to transform culture. Will you seek to share London's experience with other fire services across the UK?
So firstly, this isn't just a London problem, and I'm glad you raised the issue of Gloucester and South Wales. I mean, if you speak to Nazir Afzal, he's been contacted by dozens and dozens of people around the country with similar stories to the ones he heard from the 2,000 people he spoke to in London. The difference is we recognise there's a problem, we're taking action. And we have reforming commissioners in the fire service and the police service now determined to take action. So actually, people around the country may think this is a London problem, are lulling themselves into a false sense of security. And the LFB is always ready to help other colleagues. We can't do it in an arrogant way. People have got to ask for help. The good news, I think, with HMI's announcement this week is we get additional support. And the HMI can play that role in sharing best practice around the country as well as the relevant college as well. And so we've got to sort ourselves out first and then see how we can help others. And that's why it's really important we've got the HMI support now, which will be the checking of the homework that we all want, really, because the Commissioner's quite keen and happy for others to come in and look at how things are going. It's a very brave decision by the Commissioner to ask Nazir Afzal to do this piece of work, and I fully support him.
Thank you for that. And I am running out of time, so just very quickly, I've been disappointed, if I'm honest, with some of the social media posts around this that have been directed at you. And I think it's not helpful when we have decades-long culture issues being blamed on you, being blamed on the mayor, when we had a previous mayor who defined some of those culture issues, to be honest. I'm just wondering, though, in terms of social media, do you agree that actually going about this honestly and in a supportive way to the LFB, both because of the urgency of the issue, but also to support firefighters, is important?
Oh, listen, let's be clear. Let's not beat about the bush here. There are some people who like the status quo. Right. We've got to take them on. Because, we didn't get into politics for treading water. We came to improve people's lives and to make meaningful change. and you've got to work with people of like-minded values. We have a reforming commissioner in the fire service, a reforming commissioner in the Met Police service. Each time when there's been major reform in our country, there's been opposition by the status quo. Some would call them conservatives. I'm quite keen to bring about change. We've got a commissioner who believes in that, and we'll work with those like-minded people.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is by Assembly Member Cooper. It's on the autumn statement and the climate crisis.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for this question. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, said at COP27, and I quote, "We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator," end quote. The UK government, like other governments, is not doing enough. The autumn statement does recognise the role retrofit plays in reducing exposure to rising energy bills, but the measures announced are too little and much too late. More than a decade of government inaction on energy efficiency has left Londoners in poorly insulated homes paying more than they should for energy, potentially having to choose between heating and eating this winter. The Climate Change Committee points out that a decade ago, 2.3 million energy efficiency measures were installed by government-backed schemes. In 2021, fewer than 100,000 were installed, and sadly we're going backwards. The autumn statement prioritised nuclear, offshore wind and carbon capture and storage, and the windfall tax continues to subsidise fossil fuels over renewables. Support was needed to reverse the lack of investment in solar, district energy and onshore wind, stimulating local market activity and delivering decarbonisation and benefits now. I welcome the Chancellor's support for the government's 68% reduction target by 2030, but I'm dismayed by the continuing support for fossil fuels, further highlighted by the approval of the Whitehaven coal mine. And as inadequate as mitigation measures in the statement were, adaptation measures were non-existent. The government must commit to greater ambition in its third five-year national adaptation programme, setting out clearly defined roles and responsibilities for UK cities and local governments, backed by requisite levels of funding for delivery. London continues to lead the way, from our pioneering London Plan policies to the ultra-low emission zone. With greater powers and funding, we could do even more.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. You clearly share my disappointment. I think that we had the announcement recently of an opening of a new coal mine, but what we really needed, I think, was the announcement of a national retrofit strategy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and actually, there are so many advantages of a national retrofit strategy. People's bills come down. We address the climate emergency. We create jobs. It gives confidence to businesses to invest in these areas, and it's an opportunity that's been missed by the government.
I mean, it's a very simple announcement that could have been made, along with announcing a national clean air fund, which again wouldn't just be benefiting London. We need a national scrappage scheme and a national clean air fund, don't we?
Look, I think, air pollution is our generation's tobacco debacle, fiasco, scandal. If you read, and I'm sure you have, I mean, you're assiduous on this sort of stuff, if you read the Chief Medical Officer's annual report, what was it on? It was on air pollution, air quality, and it's a reminder of this invisible killer. And what have we got from the government? They're missing in action. A clean air fund would have given London and other cities the support they need for what we call just transition, right? You've got members in this assembly pleading in aid because they oppose ULEZ, charities, care workers and others. A clean air fund is what they should be demanding from the government, and they're silent on these really important issues.
Because Londoners pay in more than we get back out from the government, so there's no question here of a begging bowl. This is something that's absolutely critical for, particularly in urban areas across the country, isn't it?
Well, look, Londoners who own a car in London are contributing £500 million through road tax. Only some pennies come to London. The rest is distributed around the country. It could be in clean air funds, it could be in maintaining roads and the like. And this is a really good example of a scheme that would help London. And we know there's inequalities in London. We know some communities in London could do with breathing clean air. We know the consequences of polluted air.
I mean, we've also been supporting from City Hall action being taken by local authorities across London, the 32 boroughs and the city, including school streets, and including giving support not just in terms of the climate emergency and also cleaner air, but also in terms of safety. Now, sadly, we're not going to have the opportunity for a question today concerning fines being issued for cars which slightly exceed the 20 is plenty barrier. But I just wondered if you'd like to comment on that, because that was actually a project that was started under the Conservative administration in Wandsworth and on a cross-party basis has been continued by Labour. We've heard some talk this morning about cross-party approaches. Don't you think it's a shame that there's a set of Assembly members here who appear not to be interested in a cross-party approach to safety as well as air quality?
Could I commend you as one of the Labour councillors and the leader, Councillor Simon Hogg, for working on a cross-party basis with the Conservatives in Wandsworth. It's just a shame that nobody sent a memo to the Tories in City Hall about the cross-party working between our parties in Wandsworth. Why? Because the public interest, the safety of residents, deserves cross-party working. I just hope one of those Tories in Wandsworth would send a memo that's read by some of the Tories in City Hall.
They certainly had plenty to say about it last night, and I would also compliment Councillor Fraser, the Labour Cabinet member, and Councillor Locker, the Conservative Cabinet member, for their commitment to this. Thank you.
Chair, on a point of personal explanation,
I don't think anyone was named.
No, you can't. No, when you say the Tories in this chamber, you're talking about us and you're talking about all of us. And if you continue to put words in our mouth, then we'll continue to have to interrupt, because you cannot say things that we haven't said. You cannot put words in our mouths. That's not what anybody said.
Assembly Member Best, you make your comments through the chair, not directly to any other Assembly members, one thing. Yeah, and secondly, I think that there was no specific name mentioned in the comment made by the Assembly member. So I don't know why you thought you were entitled to a point of explanation.
Because you're saying Tory Assembly members, and that's me. You're talking about me. Am I not a Tory Assembly member?
Well, so look.
Am I not a Tory Assembly member?
You are a member of the Tory party.
So if you're saying the Tory Assembly members think this,
no,
you're talking about me.
No, it doesn't refer you specifically. No, it doesn't refer you specifically.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You might think so, but it doesn't.
So then name who you mean, otherwise you're talking about all of us. Name who you mean, and then they can speak.
Chair, can I point out that Len Duval and I get on extremely well, so it's completely wrong to say that we don't all get on well together. Us leaders get on extremely well. It's just that when you're in the room, Mr. Mayor, then they have to protect you, and that's a shame.
Hang on. Look, this is not...
Give me strength. Give me strength.
Whether you get along well outside or not, right, this room is a personal matter between members. But what happens in the Assembly is of concern to me.
Chair, that was the former mayor.
Okay. So, can I ask the Assembly to suspend Standing Order 2.9b in accordance with the provision of Standing Order 1.1h in order to allow the remaining business of the agenda to be completed? Thank you. The next question is in the name of Assembly Member Russell on the police and the press.
The right to protest and freedom of the press are cornerstones of our democracy. Journalists have the right to report on any form of protest and should not be prevented or in any way discouraged from doing their jobs. Hertfordshire Police Force's arrest of 3 journalists whilst they were covering a Just Stop All protest last month should not have happened. It is right that Hertfordshire Police apologised for the treatment of the journalists received and that an independent review was undertaken to understand what happened and why, to prevent this from happening again in the future. We know that policing protest is a complex operational task requiring coordination between the police and central and local government partners to deliver an effective multi-agency response and to minimise disruption and protect the public, protesters and the police. The policing of protests in London is the operational responsibility of the Metropolitan Police Service and the Metropolitan Police Service Commissioner. Sir Mark Rowley's team know they have my full support and confidence when it comes to preventing serious disruption, keeping Londoners safe and keeping our city moving while facilitating the right to protest. I meet with the Commissioner regularly and we discuss a range of operational policing matters, including public order issues. The Just Stop All protests have prompted a major and complex operational response from the MPS, requiring coordinated action to police the protests safely and effectively. I've always been vocal about the importance of tackling the climate emergency and my support for the democratic right to peaceful protest. At the same time, I've always been clear that all protests must be carried out safely and lawfully and should not put Londoners, visitors or the capital's green economic recovery at risk. I want journalists in our city to feel safe and welcome to report on all protest activity without fear of arrest or reprisal. The Commission has assured me and my Deputy Mayor that he shares this fundamental belief, and the MPs is clear that the police are not here to stop journalists from reporting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, since the wrongful arrests of those journalists on the M25 on suspicion of conspiracy to commit public nuisance, I've spoken to journalist unions and journalists about the way they are policed when covering protests. Now, they all told me about the importance of their press cards, but I was told that operational frontline officers are not all sufficiently aware of the press card scheme, and this can lead to all sorts of difficulties, which is worrying for freedom of expression and also a massive waste of police time to be needlessly arresting journalists. So in light of those journalist arrests, can you confirm whether all Met officers who police protests have done the National Union of Journalists training on public order and the police?
Chair, I simply don't know. Can I take that away and write to you to give you an answer on that?
That would be much appreciated. There have been journalists arrested by the Met in this last year. There was, back in August, there was a My London journalist arrested in Hammersmith, and in October, an independent filmmaker was arrested on Shoreditch High Street.
I can do one of those cases, arrested the My London report, arrested in August. The case, I'm told, is distinct from the Hertfordshire cases, because in this case the journalist was wrongly identified by a witness as somebody vandalising a petrol station. He was released once officers reviewed the video footage. My London acknowledged that the MP had a responsibility to investigate the accusation that was made.
Yes, although, and I quote now from that journalist, you know, my hands were cuffed at the front, I had my pen in my mouth, I asked the officer to look at my press card, which he let me produce from my pocket. It didn't make any difference. So I just think that it is important that we check, and so I'm glad you're going to write to me about whether all Met officers are doing that NUJ training. Now, the NUJ and several organisations that stand up for human rights have recently written to the Home Secretary with concerns about the recently passed Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, where the offence of intentionally or recklessly causing public nuisance was put into law. In their letter, they said this offence is too broad in scope and unduly limits a wide range of democratic activities like protest. Do you agree with me, the NUJ and others, that the powers in the Act are dangerously broad and pose a threat to human rights?
So I'm not going to talk about specific sections, so I've not had a chance to read it recently and stuff, but in general terms, yeah, I think the government's in danger. By that, I'm not suggesting that some of them haven't got the best of intentions, but the unintended consequence is a fettering of not just the right to protest, cornerstone of our democracy, but the right to report. And I think that the bill, in general terms, has gone too far.
So, Mark Rowley was in, the Commissioner was before a select committee yesterday asking for more clarity. Have you had any correspondence with the Home Secretary about these bills going through Parliament and protest?
So firstly, it's really important that the police without fear or favour. Their politics shouldn't matter. But there was a meeting convened by the Prime Minister and Home Secretary in Downing Street where that question of clarity was raised. I also raised additional points at that meeting. I'm happy to write to the member to let her know what was discussed.
That would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is the name of Assembly Member McCartney on stalking.
Thank you, Chair. This super complaint raises significant issues with the way police have identified, investigated and responded to stalking. Improving the response across the CJS is only one part of the picture. To make long-term societal change, a whole systems approach must include support and advocacy for victims, alongside effective behaviour change programmes for perpetrators. That's why I've invested £7 million in supporting victims and tackling perpetrators of stalking through the London Stalking Support Scheme and the Stalking Threat Assessment Centre, STAC. Following our oversight and recommendations, the MPS has been reviewing its work in this area. I welcome the enhanced focus and significant inroads that have been made over recent months, including increased investment and leadership shown within the Stalking Threat Assessment Centre. Along with other initiatives, this has delivered an uplift in dedicated police resources, including a new lead responsible officer for stalking, increasing the number of officers in the Stalking Threat Assessment Centre and the new stalking leads. I've also recently commissioned an in-depth problem profile of stalking in London to help better understand the needs and experiences of victims and perpetrators and the support that's available. The learnings from this work will continue to inform our oversight of the MPS and decisions about what further improvements are needed. I'll continue to work closely with the London's Victims Commissioner and support her calls to government to increase protections offered to stalking victims through the justice system.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you do appreciate the importance of this issue. The super complaint by the Susie Lamplugh Trust on behalf of a consortium of organisations has identified that police officers, and this is not just limited to the Met, but I'm concerned about the Met here, lack sufficient knowledge of the legislation. So, for example, when complaints are made to them about stalking, they are often classed as single one-off low crime incidents such as criminal damage, malicious communication or harassment, and they fail to see that actually there is a pattern of behaviour that meets the threshold for stalking, and that also they are not conversant with the process. So, for example, stalking protection orders are often not applied for. So can I ask, what are you doing via MOPAC to make sure that the Met, with the cases they are currently dealing with, and making sure that all those issues are dealt with?
Well, thank you. Firstly, thank you for focusing on the issue that we can do something about. Listen, I think that London's Victims Commissioner has been incredibly brave. Yeah. On top of her braveness for the reasons I say, but she's talked about her experience and her conversations with victims, but also her personal experience, confirm your point about the lack of the dots being joined up, about the pattern of behaviour being missed, about the cumulative impact of some of these things. Len Duval for years has been talking about the register, which the government now seems to be accepting. The previous commissioner was against, as you remember, the register. And I think the training is one part of the story, but I think recognising and being aware about the cumulative impact, patterns of behaviour is really important. And in Claire's own case, which is well documented, I'm not breaching confidences, you can see things that may have been missed and wouldn't have been missed with the proper training that you talk about.
Yes, and Claire Waxman, when she gave those interviews, actually said that she is someone who has a good deal of knowledge of police procedures, and so if there can be failings with her case, imagine what they are like to others. And the Susan Lamplugh Trust, in their super complaint, one of the recommendations they want to see is that police officers have training by a specialist stalking trainer. Is that something that your office is looking at and trying to make sure that the police have that specialist training?
Yes, so MOPAC are working with the key criminal justice agencies in developing a training offer to upskill professionals who come into contact with the victims and perpetrators of stalking. And there's some other detail I'm more than happy to write to you. Please do. To give you the detail. And please feel free to push back and challenge if you're not happy with the answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next question is the name of Assembly Member Ahmed on pay gaps.
Thank you for your question. London is a successful global city, but persistent structural inequalities remain, such as pay gaps. Since being elected, I've continually worked to address the pay gaps in our city. In London, the median gender pay gap is 16.2% and the median disability pay gap is 14.2%. These figures have remained broadly the same for a number of years, but this is not good enough and improvement is required across London's economy. I first published information on internal disability pay gaps for the GLA Group in 2021 before it became a statutory responsibility to do so. Overall pay gaps within the GLA Group have narrowed since I became Mayor. My Good Work Standards places a responsibility on employers to monitor pay gap data and publish action plans. Through this initiative, employers have taken steps to reduce the pay inequalities affecting disabled people and women. To go further, the London Recovery Board has an action in its Building a Fairer City plan for all organisations to be more transparent with employee data, including information on disability, gender and race pay gaps. Through the implementation of this plan, I am supporting more organisations to address the pay gaps that women, disabled people and minority Londoners experience. I'm also harnessing the collective annual spending power of the GLA Group to ensure suppliers and delivery partners are contributing to inclusive workplaces. This includes encouraging more suppliers to become Good Work Standard accredited and tracking key suppliers' average reported gender pay gaps, as well as the number and proportion of key suppliers reporting their ethnicity pay gap.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good morning. Mr Mayor, pay and pay gaps are, as we know, affected by recent news. Yesterday's slight drop in inflation is little comfort to workers, particularly as food inflation has risen at the same time. You earlier paid tribute to our public sector workers. Their pay rises are a fraction of rocketing bills, especially as in the last hour we have seen interest rates rise again for the 9th month in a row, this time from 3% to 3.5%, hiking mortgage payments for many homeowners. What action must the government take to reverse this appalling squeeze on living standards, which of course would affect both pay and pay gaps?
Well, Chair, I wasn't aware of the increase announced of interest rates. I suspect it's the highest in 40 years. And that'll have a real consequence, those in variable mortgages, those whose fixed-term mortgage comes to an end, and others in relation to interest rates affecting them and their families. I think the pay gap is going to get worse at a time when it should be narrowing. You've got a situation where you mentioned the increase in food inflation, the increase in rents, £3,000 over the course of the next couple of years, increase in heating. We've seen record increases, and it's a big concern we have. What we're seeing now is a phenomenon when you and I were younger there wasn't, which is in-work poverty. People got 2 or 3 jobs and are in poverty relying upon food banks. That's why it's incredibly important that we continue to lobby the government in relation to addressing these issues. The only people that can help, not City Hall, not councils, are the governments and also those employers who, you know, need to do the right thing and give their staff a pay rise that means that they can get a decent pays way for a hard day's work.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Will you support calls from the TUC and the Forset Society to write to the government to call for mandatory disability pay gap reporting for all employers with more than 50 employees and mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting for employers?
Chair, I'm happy to write to the government on the terms set out by the member to echo those calls. We, because I'm the most transparent mayor in history, have already published a lot of our data in relation to gender, race, disability and so forth, fulfilling a manifesto commitment made in Manifesto 1 and in Manifesto 2. I'm only sorry we ran out of time to discuss some of our achievements because the Tories didn't manage their time very well. But I'm more than happy to write to the government on the terms set out.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And as a member of the Oversight Committee, I was very pleased yesterday to look at the workforce report and the issues that you have just touched on with regard to the GLA, which are very encouraging. Thanks very much and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next is a question in the name of Assembly Member Duval on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocations in London.
Thanks, Chair. Last week, the government finally confirmed London's UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocation of £144 million for 3 years, from 22 to 25. This means they can now allocate funding to boroughs and other partners and launch a £30 million call for business support proposals. I welcome this funding, but it's less than half the size of the European funding it was intended to replace. Less than half the size. The whole country needs levelling up, but not at London's expense. The latest census shows Barking and Dagenham, Newham and Brent are amongst the most deprived areas in the country. London has the highest child poverty rate in the country. We need investment to deliver a more equal society. Centralised bidding regimes like the Levelling Up Fund and Towns Funds have largely excluded London. Resources are wasted bidding into these funding pots, which are often then awarded at the whim of ministers. We recently bid for investment zone funding, only to be told the whole programme had been scrapped. Instead, a fair proportion of available funding should be devolved directly to London, like UK SPF. We know London has the potential to fund its own growth, but only if we're given the fiscal levers and devolution to do so.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Of course, it's not just these grants that is disproportionately being affected by the government decision-making. There are other grants as well where London seems to be shortchanged. So the Government Clean Air Fund, launched in 2018, the Safer Streets Fund, where we only receive, it seems to be a general point, around just over 3%. The UK Community Renewal Fund, again, where we're not receiving what would be a proper entitlement based on evidence issues around our poverty or issues that the factors in terms of London. Do you not recognise that trend? Do other partners in London recognise that trend? And what discussions are going on about making representations to government about that?
I think one of the things we've got to rebut is this assumption that the streets of London are paved with gold. And I think we need to remind people across the country that's not the case. You're right in relation to the various bids, pots of money the government has, we aren't able to bid for. And actually, this summer, the mask slipped, and we discovered why. Because you had our Prime Minister in Tunbridge Wells confessing and expressing pride that he was removing funds from deprived parts of the country to divert to areas like this, Tunbridge Wells. And that's an example of the consequences of 12 years of a Conservative government. And we've got to make the point that we are the region with the highest inequality. We've got pockets of poverty across our country that are the poorest in Western Europe. We have got allies. The business community gets this point. Local authorities, cross-party, get this point. Decent MPs, cross-party in London, get this point. And we've got to persuade this government to recognise that actually it's in the national interest to invest in our capital city.
So how can the Conservatives at local government level work cross-party and recognise that fair share of resources is being taken away from London and not being allocated to London, and yet our colleagues here on the London Assembly can't quite get that?
Well, I've been really impressed by London councils under the leadership of Georgia Gould on a cross-party basis, Lib Dems, Conservatives and Labour working together to try and persuade the government. I'm really impressed by the co-chairing, Bob Mills, a Conservative member of the APPG on London. You know, and you've seen from the example in Wandsworth some cross-party work in relation to road safety. I just wish those backbench MPs in Parliament from London, those councils in London that are Conservative, would have a word with Tories in City Hall.
Thank you. And just in terms of the Levelling Up white paper states around issues around to improve productivity, boast and economic growth, encourage innovation, create jobs, enhance educational attainment, renovate social and cultural fabric in parts of London. So the words are fine. But there are parts of London that are in danger, well, parts of the sectors in London that are in danger of stalling. Would you think if we put measurable targets for the levelling up agenda to support them, that would help London's case and get the government to try and recognise about fair funding settlements for London?
That's an interesting idea. Let me take that away because I'm hoping to meet Michael Gove shortly, and that could be a way to just reassure colleagues around the country. Listen, colleagues around the country need more funding. I'm not at all saying they shouldn't get more funding, but that would just reassure them that actually on the metrics, any metrics, we've got challenges in London as well. And that may be a way of just reassuring people that this isn't unfair treatment that the capital is receiving. So can I take that away and see what we can do working with the government on that?
And should I apologise now for not saying how great you are?
Well, listen,
I missed that.
Your card is marked. Your card is marked.
I hope so.
You've got 50 seconds.
I hope so.
You've still got time.
No, I'm happy to give that time away, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, look, I know that all Assembly members here have a strong belief and interest in what they believe in and want to work for the best interests of Londoners. And sometimes we're very animated. But I know that we all join in wishing you a very happy Christmas, a joyful time with your family, and a happy New Year. And thank you very much for the answers you've given to us this morning.
Chair, can I just echo what I said at the beginning? I genuinely wish all of you a happy Christmas, and you're very good public servants who serve our city. We have arguments and debate. That's the joy of a democracy, right? That's what pluralism's about. But genuinely, I hope you and your families have a safe Christmas and a happy New Year. I look forward to Well, I don't really look forward to the next question time. But I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Bless you.
Great. And Mr. Mayor, you can go if you want to. Thank you. Okay, can I ask the Assembly to agree the motion which is set out on the agenda in my name, which is that the Assembly notes the answers to questions asked? Okay. Can I ask the Assembly to approve, noting that it's a joint decision with the Mayor, the appointment of Rory McKenna as the GLS monitoring officer with effect from 1st April 2023, and upon the terms of conditions set in paragraph 4.2 of the report, further to the interview conducted by a panel of Assembly members and two representatives of the Mayor, and further to the recommendation of the monitoring officer appointment subcommittee. Thank you. Can I ask the Assembly to agree that in relation to urgent matters only, a general delegation of authority in respect of the Assembly's powers and functions, apart from those that cannot be delegated under the GLA Act 1999, be granted to the Chair of the GLA Oversight Committee, in consultation with the group lead members, relevant committee chairs and myself, from the close of this meeting until the next meeting of the London Assembly on the 19th of January 2023. Can I ask the Assembly to agree to accept written answers to the all questions submitted to the 23rd February 2023 London Assembly Mayor's Question Time meeting under the MQT procedure in order to devote time to discussion of the Mayor's final draft consolidated budget for 23-24? The next scheduled meeting of the London Assembly will be the Mayor's Question Time held, which will take place at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 19th of January 2023 in the Chamber of City Hall. Finally, I have admitted to the agenda one item of urgent business in accordance with Section 100B 4B of the Local Government Act 1972, namely the consideration of the salary determination for the GLA elected members 2022. The urgent item has been circulated to members under a supplementary agenda which is available on the GLA's website. Can I ask the Assembly, noting that this is a joint decision with the Mayor, to A, approve the GLA elected salaries determination 2022 attached to Appendix 1 to replace and supersede the previous determination dating back from 2021, and agree that an independent review of elected member pay should be commissioned with a view to making recommendations about baseline salaries for elected members and the mechanisms for determining future pay awards. The recommendations arising from such a review will be put to the Assembly and the Mayor for consideration following the 2024 GLA elections. Agreed? And there's no other urgent business. I wish you all a very happy Christmas, a happy New Year. May you have a warm, joyful, and happy times with your families. Thank you.
And to you, Chair.
Thank you.
And to you.